Moi, je suis Ingrid Villimerino. J'ai l'accent ici à l'école de d'art et design. C'est à Genève qui s'appelle processus culturel et esthétique. Et cet accent, je l'ai invité à Ramon Grosfoguel. Ramon Grosfoguel, lui est docteur en sociologie à l'université de Genève. Il fait des recherches postcoloniales à diverses institutions, parmi lesquelles le Centre Fernand Braudel. Aussi est professeur et chercheur des études ethniques à l'Université de Californie, Berkeley. Il a publié de nombreux livres et articles, parmi lesquels Géopolitique et les trajectoires of développement, les cas de Corée, le Japon, Taïwan, l'Allemagne et Puerto Rico avec Sunyo Kami. El giro de Colonial, réflexion pour une diversité épistémique plus loin du capitalisme global en collaboration au-delà du capitalisme global en collaboration avec Santiago Castro Gómez. Alors, je te laisse la parole vraiment pour ta conférence et je te remercie pour de venir à mon invitation et donner cette conférence un plan plus ample. Non, ce n'est pas seulement pour les étudiants, aussi pour le public externe. Merci.
Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Je suis en train de donner un séminaire cette semaine, chaque jour, de lundi jusqu'à vendredi, chaque matin. Vous êtes invités à venir et participer. Et maintenant, je vais donner une conférence. Je suis invité à parler en anglais, non? Il faut parler en anglais. Oui. Okay. Donc, le séminaire, pendant le matin, c'est en français, mais donc je ne vais pas parler en anglais. Okay, so I'm going to talk. Okay, thank you. Okay. This one for the recording. Enregistrement. Okay. So what I'm going to do tonight is to well, first of all, I want to thank Professor Ingrid Merino for having invited me here, and wanted to thank for the invitation also to the seminar during the day. This is for me a good opportunity to engage with people working in the field of arts. The work that Ingrid has been doing is cutting-edge work at the level both of intellectual production and art, because Ingrid is also an artist that has presented also in the Biennale of Venice, representing Switzerland, no? And also at the MoMA in New York, and other places around the world. For me, it's an honor to get an invitation from you, of all people, to be here. Thank you. I'm going to talk tonight about the relationship, about the epistemic structures of the modern world. Epistemic structures. Okay? I'm going to talk about the Westernized university, and this relates not only with questions of knowledge production, but also artistic production. Okay, so this, we have to link, what I'm going to be talking about is linked and directly related, okay, to questions of art too. Okay? I'm going to begin with several questions that then I'm going to try to answer them. in the course of my exposition. Okay? The questions are the following. Let me first clarify that I talk about the westernized university. Westernized university. For me, everything has a name. Everything has a name and a last name. You know, I put this last name, La Université Occidentalisée. You know, I put this last name, Occidentalisée, westernized. You know, because the temptation is always to take some structure, any structure, whatever it is, that is always produced locally, and represent it as if it was universal. Okay? And so the moment you say university, and you don't put the last name to it, westernized university, no? Université Occidentalisée, no? It looks as if that structure called the university is the normal way any university should be. And it becomes naturalized and universalized. Okay? So I prefer to put something next to it because I think what we call university is really a westernized university. Okay? And I will explain why I think that. And for me, the westernized university is a global structure of power that exists all over the world. Okay? So, westernized university, I didn't say Western university. Because Western universities in that part of the world that people call the West. I said westernized university, which means that this is a structure of power. It's an institution that forms part of a global structure of power that exists everywhere in the world today. If you go to not only Paris, Genève, or in New York or London, but also if you go to Bogota, Colombia, or Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, or you go to Dakar in Senegal, okay, or you go to New Delhi in India, okay, wherever you go around the world, you find this structure everywhere, okay? But the problem, and this is where I call it westernized university, is that when you enter the classroom of any field of knowledge of the westernized university, any discipline, in the social sciences or in the humanities, okay? Social science, I mean the department, you know, sociologists, political science, economic, Department of Economic, Department of Anthropology, or humanities, you know, you name it, like philosophy or art, or, you know, if you study humanities, history, or so wherever you go in the disciplines of the westernized university, the humanities or the social sciences, the canon of thought that you're going to find, without exception, which is the most, you know, amazing thing, is males of 5 countries. Okay? Males of 5 countries. From Italy, from France, from Germany, from the United Kingdom, and welcome. There's space here, sir. You're welcome to sit in front. From United Kingdom, again, the structures of, you know, when you enter any space of the westernized university, any discipline, you find as the canon of thought males of 5 countries: Italy, France, Germany, UK, England, no? And United States. Okay? These are the people you're supposed to read, and you're supposed to master. Okay? Welcome. And you're supposed to master and apply. Look at this, I put on quote the concept of apply. You're supposed to master these authors and then apply them everywhere around the world. Okay? If you're doing sociology, you're supposed to learn these authors of 5 countries, okay? Learn their theories and apply them on quote elsewhere. Okay? If you're doing philosophy, you're supposed to read the mails of these 5 countries and also use them everywhere you go around the world, okay, as the canon of thought for doing philosophy. Okay? When you, it doesn't matter which discipline, it's always you find the same guys. Okay? Different names, but the same guys of 5 countries. Okay? Not women from those 5 countries. Okay? And not women or male from the rest of the world. Not even other countries that are considered part of the West. They're not there yet. Okay? So you hardly see someone from Spain or from Portugal, you know, in that canon of thought. Okay? The Greeks, as long as they're dead, 2,000 years ago, they're there in philosophy. Okay? The Greeks alive, they're not there. Okay? So, so this is why I call it the Westernized male university. That's the proper name, the Westernized male university. Because the canon of thought of this structure of knowledge that I call the Westernized university, that is a global, I explained already, it's a global structure of power that travels around the world, that exists everywhere in the world today. Okay? And that is called, without the last name, it's always called the university. Okay? And these structures of knowledge are taken for granted. We have accepted them as the norm. We have naturalized them as normal. It's normal to enter a classroom in the Westernized university and read guides of these 5 countries. Okay? The name changed because the disciplines are different. You know, in philosophy, you don't have the same names as sociology. In sociology, you don't have the same names as anthropology. In anthropology, you don't have the same names as you could find in history of art, history or art, or whatever field you're studying. The name changed. But they are, without exception, males of these 5 countries. Okay? This structure of knowledge, I'll be calling it epistemically racist/sexist. Okay? I will explain all these things, I will explain why. Okay? But I call it this way because we're talking about an epistemic structure that is racist because it inferiorizes everybody else except the knowledge of these Western males of 5 countries. Everybody else is considered inferior to these males. Okay? Sexist because no woman is there. Okay? Not even women from those 5 countries. Okay? So this is why I call it the Westernized male university, because it has as its foundation in the structures of knowledge that are founded in this university. The foundational structure of knowledge are patriarchal and are racist at the same time. That's why I use the term epistemic racism/sexism. See, because they go together. They're not, you cannot disentangle them. Okay? When you reduce all the possibilities of knowledge in all those fields of knowledge to only what is produced by males of 5 countries that are considered to be universal, because this is how they dismiss everybody else. They will say that the reason, if you go for example to a department of philosophy, okay, but you could do the same exercise to any other department. Department of philosophy, you enter the classroom, it's called philosophy, okay? And what you read are males of these 5 countries, okay? If they were more honest, they should call it Department of Western Male Philosophers, which is fine, okay? Then I know what I'm going into, you see? Then is clear. Okay, you're not selling me anything different, you see? But you're selling me that this is philosophy. And the way they argue this is by saying that it's philosophy because this tradition of thought of Western males are the only people that are able to produce a universal knowledge. The other ones, a Buddhist philosopher, an Islamic philosopher, a philosopher, a Mara philosopher, etc., from other traditions, they're not philosophers. Okay? Because that's too particularistic. This is the way it's argued. They are inferior to the knowledge of Western men of 5 countries because they are too particularistic. The only ones that are able to do a universal thinking are these Western men of 5 countries. Okay? Now, this is a particularism disguised as universalism. Okay? Because theory, knowledge, is always produced from social historical experiences. Okay? Theory and knowledge is not produced out of nothing. Okay? Theory and knowledge is always produced in context. Okay? It's always in a context of, in a particular context that is social and historical. That means that these males of these 5 countries, the theories they have produced are always in relation to the problematics, to the issues, to the problems that they face in their societies. You see? And therefore their theories are always produced in relation to the particular experiences, social and historical, okay, of the places they're coming from. Okay? This means that the social historical, the theories coming from the social historical experience of 5 countries are supposed to give you the conceptual tools to understand the rest of the world. And you're supposed to apply them. Even if the social historical experience of the rest of the world have nothing to do with the social historical experience of Italy, France, Germany, UK, and the USA. Just to give you an example. The theory produced by these social thinkers in the social science or in the humanities is based on the experience, historical and social, and of the problems that Europeans of these 5 countries, in this case European males, has faced historically and socially. So their preoccupation when they are thinking and doing research and doing investigation and producing concept and knowledge is in relation to the problems of their own countries and their own societies and this region of the world called Western Europe, but narrow it down to 5 countries. Okay? Because there are other countries in Western Europe are not part of the canon, that are expelled from the canon. I will explain that. Why? But the question is, look at how the population of these 5 countries compose 12% of the population of the whole world. And the pretension is that the theories produced and the concepts produced as part of the problems, social and historical, okay, of these countries are supposed to give you the tools to understand the social and historical experience of 88% of the rest of the world. Okay? You cannot get more provincial than that. Okay? You cannot get more provincial than that. This is provincialism disguised as universalism. Okay? But because they are considered to have the superior knowledge relative to all women of the world and relative to people outside the so-called West and inside the West who are not part of the canon, then people take this for granted. And people take these structures of knowledge as natural, normal, and this is the university after all, no? Objective, neutral. That's why we don't put the last name to it. We never say westernized male university, we say the university. That's why we never say Department of Western male philosophers or Western male philosophy. Okay? We say Department of Philosophy. The assumption is that this is it. The rest are, inferior relative to it. We don't say Departments of Colonial Social Sciences. Okay? We never say Department of Western Male Sociology. We always, that's sociology, that's social science. It never has this adjective, no? It's assumed that this is universal and this is it. This is science, it's objective, it's neutral, and this is it. And you have to follow this. Okay? And they disguise the knowledge, their location, in the body politics of knowledge and in the geopolitics of knowledge. I use body politics because these are people with bodies, thinking from also bodies, okay? But also the geopolitics. You're thinking from space, from a part of the world. You're not thinking from a God-eye view, okay? You're thinking from a particular space in the world with certain experiences that are not the same as other parts of the world. Okay? And therefore, the theories coming out of that are very particular too. But they hide it. They hide their location. They hide their situatedness under a discourse of universality. And that's how they claim superiority over the rest. Because the rest are particularistic. If a woman says anything, you're particularistic. If an indigenous person in America saying you are particularistic, you're not universal enough, okay? Because you are thinking from a place in the world. And since feminist thought always say knowledge is situated, they will say, you see, they say themselves. They are particularistic. We don't think from any particularity. We are universal, therefore objective. We're not biased. Our knowledge is useful for everybody in the world. Because we're not thinking from the interest of any group. This is what they will be claiming. Okay? So, the question now is, I mean, it's worse. It's not just 12% of the population of the world. It's 6%, because these are the males of these 5 countries. These are the theories produced out of the social historical experience of 6% of the population of the world. They don't include 94% of the social historical experience of the rest of the world. Okay? So this is really, really pathetic that we are at the beginning of the 21st century with structures of knowledge, with the world so diverse, with the world so complex and multiple, with many epistemologists, with many social scientists, philosophers, historians, art critic, artists, etc., around the world, from different cultural traditions, epistemologists, cosmologists, etc., who produce critical knowledge, who produce science too. But we're still with structural knowledge, obsolete. Okay? Totally obsolete for the times that we live. Okay? Because the world is more diverse. Okay? And the knowledge of the world is broader than the knowledge of the Western males about the world. Okay? That's one part of the world. And I said this is a very small part of the world. But because of a history of domination that have to do with history of colonial history, we're still carrying on into the present structures of knowledge that goes back to colonial times. Okay? And that are obsolete relative to the world we're living and to where we're going today. Okay? And the more we move into the 21st century, the more you have the rise of other countries around the global south, okay? The more obsolete these structures of knowledge become. But the arrogance is to think that this is it. You want to know about science, philosophy, art, whatever, you have to go through these authors. It's the only way. And you need to apply them. Okay? Even if, historically speaking and socially speaking, the realities of 94% of the rest of the world and their experiences are quite different from this 6%. Okay? So you're supposed to understand Brazil using these authors. You're supposed to understand South Africa using these authors. China using these authors. India using these authors. All the other intellectual production that has been done throughout the last 2-3 centuries, from those locations in the world, from different body politics and geopolitics of knowledge, do not form part of the canon. They are silenced, invisibilized, inferiorized in the epistemic structures of the world we live. Okay? So it's not that there's nothing there. There's a lot out there. It's just that it's not recognized as such in a space like this one. Okay? And they're invisibilized, they're marginalized, they do not form part of the conversation. Okay? And that's part of what I've been calling here epistemic racism/sexism. Okay? So the question now is, how did we get there? What is, because structures are produced historically and socially. Structures are not natural. Structures are socially, historically produced. So the question is, how we got to this kind of structures of knowledge? What happened? Okay? And now I'm going to start a narrative that I will ask for your patience, because it might seem as if I got lost in outer space. Okay? But please be patient, because you'll see how everything will fit together to answer this question. How did we get to structures of knowledge that are epistemically racist and sexist? Okay? How in the 21st century we're still carrying on these structures of knowledge? How did this happen? Why other people from the so-called West are not even there? Okay? How did this happen? I will start a narrative that might seem as if I got lost. Okay? So please be patient with me, because it will take us away for a while to then come back to the answer to these questions. And I want to start in the 15th century, in the conquest of Al-Andalus. I want to start there, the conquest of Al-Andalus. Do you know what is Al-Andalus? Do you know what I'm talking about? Al-Andalus. This is part of European history, because of Eurocentric historiography, we don't learn these things. Al-Andalus is a country in Europe, was a country in Europe. Okay? Al-Andalus, that existed for 800 years. Okay? It's in a sense, it's part of European history. But we never, Eurocentric historiography will never take it this way. You know, it will always marginalize the conversation about the history of Al-Andalus. And you'll see why in a few minutes. Al-Andalus is that part of the world, or that country in the world, that used to be in the south of Europe. In particular, in Portugal, Spain, south of Italy, all the way to Greece. Okay? This was a part of the world that was part of Islamic civilization. Okay? It was part of Islamic civilization during 800 years. Okay? So we're talking about what? It's a long period, 800 years. A long, long period. Think about the fact that those areas, south of Spain, you know, Italy, a good portion of Italy, Portugal, they were under Muslim civilization Islamic civilization longer than what they have been under Christian civilization. 1492 was the last remaining moment, okay, of existence of a political authority in that part of the world called Al-Andalus. Okay? That was the conquest of the Sultanate of Granada when that happened. No? And that was the destruction of that, the last remaining, okay, political power part of that era. Okay? And I want to say a few things because every time we talk about these things, we need to clarify so many things. There are so many lies in the narrative of Eurocentric history that we have to start like from A, B, C, D. I mean, because if not, everything I'll be saying will be distorted if you don't know some basic things. Okay? I don't have time to develop all the basic things. That would take me another conference. Okay? But it's important to say that Europe was a very marginal village of the world, okay, during all those centuries. Okay? Before 1492, it was Christian Europe was a very marginal village. Science, knowledge, philosophy, all of this was highly developed elsewhere. Okay? But Eurocentric historiography always distorted things because always tell us that Europe is naturally, European man, is naturally and inherently scientific. And science is European. This is the image we have. We never think about the fact that the Maya civilization in America has the most precise calendar in the world. Okay, with capacity of prediction of eclipses, all kind of astronomic phenomenon. Okay, in 1492, up to 1492, we never imagined that Greek philosophy arrived to Europe through Islamic civilization, through Islamic philosophers, who were the ones who took seriously the Greeks. While here, if you have a book of Aristotle, they will burn you alive. I'm not kidding, this is serious. They will burn you alive. For centuries, you couldn't read the Greeks. They invent a history later to make you believe that the superiority of the Western man is such, over the rest, they need to then rewrite history. And so in the 17th, 18th century, they invent a new narrative of history in which European civilization is supposed to begin with the Greeks, then the Roman Empire, followed them by the Dark Ages, followed them by the Middle Ages, then by the Renaissance, then by the Enlightenment, okay? And then you ask the question, what is this thing called Dark Ages, Middle Ages? What is that? It has no name. Well, it has a name. It's called Islamic civilization. That was the renaissance of science, the renaissance of technology, renaissance in art, in architecture, in all kind of knowledge. I cannot even begin here to describe that history that Europeans learned from Islamic civilization in Europe, in this territory we call Europe today. Okay, they learned all these different things. Okay, because Europe was a very marginal, obscurantist part of the world. If you try to do science in Europe, they will burn you alive. If you try to do philosophy like with the Greeks, they will burn you alive. But they invent later this idea, this fiction, that the origins of the West is in Greece. Well, I'm sorry, if you read Martin Bernal's book, Black Athena, okay, professor at Cornell University, he shows without doubt how Greek civilization 5 centuries before Christ was a crossover of Phoenician, Persian, and Egyptian, Bantu, African civilization. And how all the depth of the Greeks in language, philosophy, all kind of things especially to the Egyptians, to the Africans, who, by the way, were blacks. We're not whites, okay? We have to say that because that's another rewriting of history. They tell you that Egypt was white. They whitened Egypt, okay? But Egypt was black, okay? And so it was one of the most advanced civilizations in the world, okay? And the Greeks took over a lot of their knowledge. The concept of democracy is Greek, right? No, it's Egyptian. It came from the Egyptians. Okay, that's even the word democracy comes from the Egyptians. It doesn't come from the Greeks. The Greeks took it from the Egyptians. Okay, so listen, it will take me a long time to go over to dismantle all these lies that we call history, okay, or historiography. Okay, because this is a Eurocentric reconstruction built after the European colonial expansion in 1492. They have to invent a new narrative to make the claim of superiority over the rest. The West superior over the West. To make that claim, they have to invent a history. And in that invention, they have to claim the Greeks to be their origin, when in fact the Greeks have nothing to do with the West. Okay? By the way, the Greeks were learned by Europeans through Islamic philosophers that were the ones taking them seriously. When in Europe, Christian Europe, they will burn you alive if you open a book of the Greeks. Okay? For centuries, they will burn you alive. But then they invent the history. No, we go back to the Greeks. You have to invent an origin that gives you some prestige and superiority over the rest. Okay? And then, of course, the Roman Empire, and then Dark Ages, Middle Ages. I'm sorry, that has a name. You want to hide it? That's your problem. It's called Islamic civilization. That's what they call the Dark Ages, Middle Ages. Okay? It's called Islamic civilization. That was here, next to Christian Europe, and it was the place where they have access to many knowledges that in Christian Europe were forbidden at the time. Okay? So, why this Al-Andalus have such let's put it this way, such an important role in the building of a flourishing of architecture, art, sciences, philosophy, you name it? Well, there are two answers to this. The first one is very, very clear. Islamic civilization, while Europe was basically an isolated village of the world, okay, for centuries, for many years, especially after the fall of the Roman Empire, Islamic civilization went from the Atlantic, that is Al-Andalus, all the part of the south of Europe, north of Africa, west of Africa, east of Africa, what we call the Middle East, south of Asia, east of China, Indonesia, all the way to Mindanao in the Philippines. Okay? So it covers a huge part of the world. Okay? And so that network of the Islamic civilization was not only a network of commodities, markets, and trade, it was also a network of knowledge exchange. That is, things that were invented in China or invented in India, or scientific knowledges from other parts of the world were coming here, okay, through Al-Andalus, because they were the part of the world in south, the only part of Europe connected with that world. North of that was Christian Europe, that was highly obscurantist. Okay? Now, when I say obscurantist, this is the second reason of why you have science elsewhere and not in Europe at the time. And that has to do with the transformation of early Christianity, okay, into an ideology of state when Constantine, 4 centuries after Christ, takes the Christian spirituality and turns it into a state ideology. Okay? At this moment, there are some important transformations in Christianity. One of them is the idea of the Trinity that didn't exist in the first 4 centuries after Christ. The idea of Trinity. You know, God the Holy Spirit and the Son. Okay? This idea, the Trinitarian idea, emerged with Constantine. What happened was that Christianity as a spirituality was an anti-imperialist movement that were fighting the Roman Empire. Okay? And the Roman Empire, when they saw they couldn't fight them, Constantine did an important move to neutralize them, and that was to adopt it as ideology of the state. And in doing that, transforming the content. And in the content and the transformation of the content, they did a very important move here to turn Christianity from a progressive and imperialist movement into a kind of imperial ideology. Okay? So what they did was to bring in something called dualism. That is this division between the spiritual world and the material world. Okay? Dualism was fundamental for adopting Christian ideology, the ideology of the state, because if you have this dualism, you split. First, you sacralize the state. You make it a representative of God on earth. Second, you divide the material world from the spiritual world. And so anything you do in relation to the material world become demoniac, okay? Evil, part of the devil, okay? Because that's the material world is seen or perceived as something evil, this dualism, and the spiritual world is the good, the God world, okay? And as part of the spiritual world, you have the state that becomes sacralized now, sacralized, and so it becomes a form of political authority in which to make a critique put you on the side of devil. You see, once you sacralize the state, once you make the split between the spiritual world and the material world, and the material world becomes suspicious of evilness, okay, then the authorities of power are now sacralized as the representative of God on earth. That's why the Vatican is in Rome, okay? It's in Rome because of this history I'm telling you, that you have now a center of power, okay? It's placed there, and you use this dualism, okay, now as a technology of power. Because now you're going to use the dualism to say anybody who criticizes the power structure is immediately seen as something from the devil. Okay? Anybody who does science is immediately suspicious. If you find something you experimentize, you do experiment about the world, about life, about so-called nature. Okay? And you find things that contradict the dogmas of the church, you become suspicious of being part of the demon. Okay? So this created a situation in Europe and that's why I call it obscurantism, where it was very difficult to do science, to do critiques, okay, to think independently, etc. Okay? Over centuries, that was European local history. That obstacle did not exist in Islamic civilization, in indigenous civilization of the Americas, in the Chinese civilization, all the civilizations that coexisted at the time, did not have that problem. Why? They did not have problem. Because they have a notion of cosmological notion that is not dualistic, that is holistic. What does that mean? That means that in the indigenous civilization of America, they talk about Pachamama. In Islamic civilization, they talk about Tawhid, the notion of diversity within unity. The best translation of these concepts is cosmos, in which the human and everything is inside. Okay? We are all part of this unity. Okay? The translation we do, Allah to God, Pachamama, God, we turn it God. We call God everything that any spirituality says. We call it God in our translation to European languages. But the moment we say God, immediately we colonize these notions, because what happened is that we turn the notion of these other spiritualities into Christendom. Christendom is this God of 4 centuries after Christ of Constantine, when Christianity becomes ideology of the state. And what is this God? This God in Christendom is a white man with a beard in a cloud with a baston. You say, un baston. You say, an old white man. It's an old white man with a beard. It's in a cloud, watching everybody with a baton. You say, baton. And if you behave wrongly, it hits you in the head. Okay? And if you keep behaving wrongly, send you on fire, to hell. Right? So it's a God that surveil and punish. Okay? That's the title of the book of Foucault. But this is Christian. It's surveil and punishment. Okay? Surveil and punishment. This is a God that surveils and punishes. And it's human-like. It's human-like. In these other cosmologies, Islamic, indigenous, in Asia, etc., the notion here is Allah, for example, or Pachamama, or things like this have a different connotation. The best translation that I can give you, instead of using God, because immediately we say God, immediately we translate into European language, and then in our cosmological understanding of God, immediately we put there this Christian God, okay, and we think it's the same everywhere, and that's not the case, okay? What they call Pachamama or Allah or things like that is a force that creates life with intelligence. It's a force that creates different forms of life, but with intelligence. That would be, I think, the best translation. That is, we're talking not about a human-like, like we do with Christendom. Like God is a white man, old white man with a beard in a cloud watching you. No, He's a force that creates life with intelligence. And we are all created by that force. Everything. Everything in the universe is created by that force. But nobody and no object or subject or form of life can claim to be that force. So it's immanent because we are all created by that. But at the same time, it's transcendental because it's beyond anything else. That's the critique of idolatry that you find in Judaism. They have this similar notion in Judaism. Okay, similar notion in Judaism. In early Christianity, that was the notion. Nothing could be equivalent to God. Okay, nothing. There's no human representation of God. Nobody can say, I am the representative of God on earth, or I am the Son of God. This is all came after with Constantine and Christendom. Okay? Christianity turning into ideology of state. So what happened? With this cosmological understanding of Christendom, it was impossible to do science, it was impossible to do critique, it was impossible to do many things. Because the powers that be will use this dualistic notion to go after people who will be questioning the hegemonic dogmas. Okay? And they will burn them alive. Okay? That's why science was very difficult to be practiced here. And that's why elsewhere they have scientific advancement and development because of the notion of unity. If you find something in nature through an experiment, okay, that's part of the same force. Nothing is outside that force. And therefore it doesn't threaten you see, the political authority or anything, because everything is inside that. It's inside that cosmos or that force, you see? And therefore, that's why, for example, you have all this advancement in astronomy, medicine, in all kind of areas, okay, that Europe at the time didn't have. Okay? And not only didn't have, it was impossible to do that in Europe at the time. They would kill you alive, they would burn you, okay, for being a heretic, for being all kind of thing. We know that history, okay? Now, what happened is that then, with the rise of the West, after European colonial expansion, then they start the same way that they appropriated resources and wealth through the colonial expansion. They also appropriated all these knowledges and recycled them as naturally and inherently European men. And then hide and destroy the memory of where the things were coming from. Okay? For example, I'll give you we can go over many examples. One of them, I recommend you to read George Saliba, historian of science at Colonial University, who demonstrates how the great Copernicus, that we read as if this was the guy who invented or who discovered the idea that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but that the Earth is going around the sun, right? And now we read this as the source of that knowledge. Well, it happened that 400 years before Copernicus, the school of Baghdad, the astronomical school of Baghdad of Islamic civilization, have not only discovered that, but have developed all the mathematical formula and all the diagrams that Copernicus later used. So the great Copernicus plagiarized the school of Baghdad. Okay? But then it's recycled, you know, as if this is a Copernicus thing, have nothing to do with anybody else. Okay? That's just to give you an idea of all the distortions in our memory. Okay? In order to do that, they have to do a good effort of rewriting history. And that's the history we read, and we take it for granted, you know, and we accept it as normal, natural, etc. You know, when in fact, all these histories, this Eurocentric narrative is hiding all these appropriations that were done to the rest of the world. Not only of wealth, but also of knowledge. Okay? Modern science did not begin with Europe. Okay? Modern science began way back, before Europe. What happened was that Europe, after the rise of the West with the European colonial expansion, they appropriated all this knowledge, rewrote history, okay? And we learn it today as if this is a European thing. And with the colonization of the rest of the world and the destruction of all these other civilizations through colonialism, those places lost the cutting edge structures that they had to develop science. So they got stagnant in scientific development, in philosophy, all kinds of stuff, because they became subordinated to the West through colonialism. So all these other worlds were destroyed. And the memory, even the memory of the people colonized, were also cut off. So you have many people that they don't know this history, even in the colonized world. Because part of the work of colonialism is also to erase the memory of the colonized people about their past. And then rewrite history in such a way that make you believe that after all the West is superior because they have science, they have knowledge, they have philosophy, they have... You see? So this is a strategy. So I'm saying this as a preamble, okay, to what I'm going to say now. Okay? Just keep this in mind, please, because this is now, after saying all this, now I'm beginning my talk. Okay? Now I'm beginning my talk. Okay? So, let's go back to 15th century, the conquest of Al-Andalus. There was first, this is another thing I don't have time to talk. There's no such a thing as a reconquest. The idea of the reconquest, which was the discourse used by the Spanish Castilian monarchy to justify the conquest of Al-Andalus, they use the word reconquest. Reconquest means, in the historiography, Eurocentric historiography, that the Muslims have invaded Spain 8 centuries after Christ, and now they're reconquering. Okay? That is recovering what was conquered by the Muslims. Well, I don't have time to develop this. Well, there was no conquest of Spain. What happened in 8th century after Christ was much more complicated than that. Okay? Because first, Spain did not exist at the time. That's the first thing you have to know. Spain is something that emerged much later. Okay? It's an invention later. At that time, it was called Hispania. Hispania was the name given by the Roman Empire to that part of the world. It was full of Iberian people. It was indigenous people of the land there who spoke languages that were indigenous to that part of the world. Spanish, what we call Spanish Castellano, was spoken by a small number of people in a small place called Castilla. Okay? By the way, it didn't have even, at the time it had many other names, but that part of the world, that part was the only one speaking Spanish. The rest of the area spoke other languages, okay? Many other languages. You know, that was so, and they practiced a spirituality that was the spirituality of the early Christianity, not of the spirituality, the Christianity of the Roman Empire. Okay, so these people were at the time oppressed by the Visigoths, who have conquered that part of the world after the decline of the Roman Empire. The Visigoths with the bishops of the Vatican. These were the elites, and they super oppressive elites against Jews, against the Iberian people, against the other ethnicities there, okay, that spoke many languages there. These people were highly oppressed. And so when the Muslims came, in 3 years, without airplanes, without motorized vehicles, without anything, they destroyed the power of the Visigoths. You cannot explain that by saying this is a conquest. Because a conquest had the implication that these people came and imposed themselves over the population. Okay? And you cannot explain how come in 3 years they were able to liberate all the territories from the power of the Visigoths and the Vatican, okay, without understanding that what happened was that people got together, okay, and destroyed the power of the Visigoths. And that got together were Christians, were Iberian people, were the Muslims, were everybody, the Jews, okay, everybody were together fighting this power. When the new power emerged, okay, that was an Islamic form of political authority, it has a different logic from the Christian logic. That is, one political authority with multiple identities and multiple spiritualities. That means that in Al-Andalus you have a form of political authority in which Christianity, Judaism, and Islam coexisted and lived with each other. And the rights of Christians and Jews were recognized by the Muslim political authority. And they lived for centuries together, okay, without, where do you think the Jews massacred over centuries in Christian Europe were going? Where did they go? They escaped to Islamic territory, that were the places where the rights were recognized by the political authorities. In North Africa, as well as in Al-Andalus. They used to escape there. Remember also there were women crossing to Al-Andalus to get divorced. Because in Al-Andalus, divorce was recognized. In the Christian world, divorce was recognized how many decades ago? Divorce, the right to divorce for a woman was a few decades ago. It's a 20th century thing. In the Muslim civilization, they already have that. recognized and practiced. So there were a lot of Christian women crossing to Al-Andalus to get divorced. Those are things that are buried in history, okay? Then, to come back to this history, there were two forms of political authority. Every time it took the Christian monarchy 800 years to take over all the territory. 800 years. That tells you something about the difference between the arrival of Muslims that in 3 years emancipated the whole thing. The Christians took them 800 years. That's because the people did not join them. This is the point. It was a conquest. But they hide the conquest they were doing against the Muslim and Jews, okay, on the guise of a reconquest. Okay? And so what happened was that they were, everywhere they go, they will impose a form of political authority. That was one state, one identity, one religion. Anybody else, wherever they conquer, they will do ethnic cleansing. Okay? That's called genocide today. They will do genocide against the population. They will clean up the land from people who do not have this identity of the new state, the Spanish, this monarchy. It was a Christian monarchy. If you happen to be Jew or Muslim, there were 3 options. If you resist, they will kill you. Okay? If you decide not to resist, but keep your spirituality and your identity, you have to run away from the land and go elsewhere. Because if not, they will kill you. And the other option was conversion. Okay? Conversion by force. So those who stayed there were forced to convert to Christianity. Okay? The destruction of Al-Andalus, we have to remember, had this possibility of having coexistence of identities and spiritualities and recognized in the jurisprudence of the state, of the Sultanate. Okay? In the new form of power that came with the Christian, it was one identity, one authority, one spirituality. If you don't fit under the identity and spirituality, then you were killed, or you have to run away, or you were forced to convert. Okay? These were the options. Okay? Okay, then we have the first meeting of Christopher Columbus with the king and the queen of Spain. Isabel la Católica, Elizabeth the Catholic, y Fernando el Católico, Ferdinand the Catholic. Okay? Christopher Columbus comes with a plan called Enterprise of the Indies. Okay? In the first meeting. Okay? We have to remember, again, we have to go over, derail a little bit to clarify things. The myth is that Columbus is this hero who went and risked his life because at that time the belief was that the earth was plane and he could have fallen into the abyss. You heard that, right? They're still saying the things. Listen, that's a fairy tale, okay? To make of Columbus some kind of hero. Everybody knew at the time because the many other civilizations, including the Mayas and the Muslims and the Chinese, who have already cartographed the world. Okay? The Chinese have maps of the world already. Okay? Knew that the world was rounded, and Columbus knew it too. Everybody knew that. Okay? So this idea that he was going this way, he was risking the play, that people didn't know that the world was round, that it was a play. So we need to clarify all these things on the side, to just keep the narrative in the same way, because if not, if you don't know these things. He was coming with Chinese maps, okay? He's not going to risk his life like that. He was coming with Chinese maps. This is not people, like heroes taking risks and things. He knew where he was going, okay? The Chinese maps already were, why is it that the navigators of the conquest, they are all Italians? Have you noticed this? Columbus, Genoese, Magallanes, Vespuccio, and so on. All of them were Italians. Why? Because they were the ones with those secret maps that have arrived to Italy through the networks of the Vatican. And so they were running around with these maps and negotiating with empires, and say, okay, I have this map, we can go this way, this kind of thing. And that's why they were going around, and that's why you didn't have navigators from other, Spanish navigators. You didn't have Spanish navigators in the conquest. The conquest were all,
Vasco da Gama? Huh? Vasco da Gama.
And Vasco da Gama was going, remember, through the south of Africa. Yeah. I'm talking about the ones going through the Atlantic, through the other side. Because what happened is that if you watch those maps, the Americas, North, Central, and South America appears in a very clear way in the maps, but as a peninsular extension of China. That is, the Pacific Ocean becomes straight like this. It's not so huge. And it's not from the Strait of Bering that it begins, North America. It's from China. You see the point? So the Atlantic, the Pacific almost disappeared. But because at the time, no European could read those maps, okay? Columbus saw the map and said, oh, this is India. He called it India. He thought that was India. And that's why it was called the Enterprise of the Indies. He thought he was going to India. He died without knowing that he was elsewhere. Okay? Because at the time, Europe was a very obscurantist place. So they didn't know how to read the maps. They knew the map. They could navigate because the Muslims have already developed the technology of how to navigate without being close to the earth, to the coast. You could navigate way far away through, and that was developed by the Muslims, okay, by the Muslim civilization. So they have learned all this stuff. That's why at the time they could go to far away from the shore, okay, and be able to navigate. So he knew how to do that, but he didn't know how to read those maps. He knew that was that way, but he called that India. He thought that was India, okay? Out of the Columbus ignorance, geographical ignorance, we call the indigenous people in the Americas today Indios, Indians, okay? Out of that ignorance, okay? When in fact nobody there called themselves Indian, okay? That's an invention, that's a colonial invention, okay? So, having said that, they had the first meeting. Let's go back to the meeting, and Elizabeth and Ferdinand tells Columbus, this is a great plan, we're going to do it, but first we need to destroy the last remaining political authority of Al-Andalus, which is Granada. Once we defeat Granada and we unify the territory under one crown, one spirituality, one identity, then we go elsewhere. Then we take this plan and go elsewhere. At that time, the Spaniards have a lot of interest in going that way through the Atlantic because the Vasco da Gama with the Portuguese have gone through the south of Africa. How did he get to India? Because the Muslim navigators in East Africa showed him and took him to India. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know where he was. You see what I mean? It was the Muslim navigators, Africans, who took him there. Have you read his biography? It's very interesting. He just had to hire navigators all the way going there because he didn't know how to get there. Okay? Remember, Europe was a very obscurantist place. Okay? It was not connected with the world or anything, you know? So all these Muslim navigators have gone, you know, back and forth elsewhere, okay? So he has to hire them to get to India. That's how he got to India. And so that route was already taken by the Portuguese, you see? The other route for the Venice, you know, the Venetians was through the East Mediterranean, okay? And then you have the Ottomans that were already connected with that Muslim fringe that goes all the way to the other side. So they have a lot of, they couldn't go, the Spaniards could not go through the Muslim, you know, through the Ottomans. So the only choice that we're going that way, you know, through the Atlantic, and that's when Columbus showed the plan, the maps, everything, you know, I said, okay, let's try, but let's first destroy the last remaining part of Al-Andalus. So while they were conquering Al-Andalus, they did several things. One thing they did, it was not only genocide. As I said, they were killing Jews and Muslims. That was would resist or try to stay keeping their identity, okay? But also, they would practice epistemicide. What I mean by epistemicide is destruction of knowledge. So, for example, to give you an example, the Library of Cordoba, okay? The Library of Cordoba have more than 500,000 books. When they conquered Cordoba, they burned the library. Think about the fact that the largest library in Christian Europe at the time did not have 1,000 books. The Library of Cordoba in Al-Andalus have more than 500,000 books. When they conquered this space, they burned the library. They burned it. Okay? And every place where they went in Al-Andalus, they would be burning the libraries. Until at the end, the Library of Granada, when they conquered Granada, Cardenal Cisneros burned more than 250,000 books, okay, of the Library of Granada. It's interesting because when they were burning the books of the Library of Granada, they sent people to take those books that have to do with technology and science, took them aside. All the others burned them, okay? But they took a lot. This is where I'm telling you that a lot of these books were carried over, and that's how you get, you know, a lot of this access to knowledge from the Islamic world that were, you know, science, technologies, things like this. But anyway, so that's a parenthesis. So genocide, epistemicide, together, because when you colonize, in this process of colonization of the Islamic, remember, this is an obscurantist Christendom type of state, okay? And so they went after the knowledge. They wanted to erase that memory, okay, so that the new generations, you know, the next generation would not have any memory of that. You see, of those identities, those spiritualities, those other forms of life, okay? So they kill and burn, okay? This is the strategy. You kill people, you burn the thing, and then you occupy the land. You occupy the land with Christians coming from the north. That's called, in the literature today, settler colonialism. It's called settler colonialism. Okay? That began there in Al-Andalus in the 15th century. You have this process of, you know, expelling people from the land, occupying with Christians, okay? And then they put forward something called the encomienda. The encomienda is they will put to work those Muslims and Jews that decided to convert by force. They put them to work in the land now in a form of coerced form of labor, forced labor, okay? That's called the encomienda, with an encomendero, the guy running the operation, okay? And the encomendero not only is surveilling you in terms of that you have to work by force, but also is surveilling your conversion. Okay? So the encomendero, I'm mentioning all these things for a reason. Okay? You'll see in a minute. So the encomendero, that's called the encomienda. It's a form of kind of, let's say, it's a form of forced labor where people have to work the land by force, and the encomendero is surveilling, making sure that you're working and you have to work there, you know, the land for this encomendero, but also you have to, they surveil your conversion. And in the struggle for conquest of Al-Andalus, they use a slogan called purity of blood. The purity of blood. Okay? They will say, in the name of the purity of blood, they will be conquering lands in Al-Andalus. Okay? What is purity of blood? Purity of blood, it doesn't have yet a connotation, okay, related to racism. Okay? It's not, yes, it's a proto-racist notion, but it's not yet fully racist. Because purity of blood meant the following, meant that when they conquered the territories of Al-Andalus, they would be surveilling the people that were calling that they converted. Okay? The Muslims converted, the Jews converted, they would surveil them. So how do they know who to survey, who not to survey? Well, this is the purity of blood. They will look to the genealogical tree of your family. Even if you are a Christian, but you have a grandmother or grandfather that was Muslim or Jew, they will check on you to make sure that you're not faking conversion. Okay? With my excuses to Foucault, okay, biopolitics began in the 15th century. Because Foucault is not only Eurocentric, he's worse, he's French-centric. So the French centrism of Foucault, if he was Eurocentric, it would be better, because at least he would know, he would have looked at other parts of Europe, like Spain, he would have seen that there was biopolitics in the 16th century already. In the 15th century, you have biopolitics there. Okay? So, but anyway, that's another parenthesis. So, he thinks of biopolitics, in the 19th century. That's where he placed biopolitics. He doesn't see it in the 15th, 16th. I mean, he's just looking at France, but he doesn't know about Spain. So that's what I'm saying. It's not, if he was at least Eurocentric, it would be better. But he was French-centric. Really. So, and that's why his genealogy of racism placed racism in the 19th century. Okay? With no connection with colonial history, but anyway, we'll see in a minute that. So what happened was that they start surveilling the people. How do they surveil? They will watch your everyday practices. What do you do on Friday? You see the point? Let's check the Muslims. What do you do on Saturdays? Let's check the Jews. Okay? Let's do it's called La Fiesta del Cerdo, the pork feast. Okay? They do a feast with pork in the streets, and they watch who eats pork, who doesn't eat pork. Okay? So, I mean, I cannot go into that. We will be 2 hours talking about this surveillance. Okay? So it was called purity of blood men. If you were fully Christian, they won't surveil you. They will assume that you are Christian. But if you're a Muslim converted, or if you're a Christian that 3 generations back, your family, there was someone there that was Jew or Muslim, they will check on you, okay, to check all these things, okay? So, let's continue. So, Columbus go to Santa Fe, a few kilometers south of Granada, where the Christian monarchy military forces were settled there, ready to enter Granada. Okay? And he was there waiting for the fall of Granada, because that's what the king and the queen have told him. We have to wait until this, and then we can talk about this. So, to make a long story short, January 2nd, 1492, January 2nd, 1492 is the fall of Granada. Okay? And the Castilian Christian monarchy put their crown now in Alhambra. The Alhambra is the palace and this place where the Sultanate used to live and be. Okay? So now they go and occupy that space, expel the Sultanate from the place, and now they will rule Spain from there. Okay? Now they have unified the place. So January 11, 1492, like a week later, comes Columbus and have the meeting, the famous meeting with Queen Elizabeth in one of the rooms of Alhambra. And that's when Elizabeth gave him the money, and the royal authority to go to the Indian enterprise. To make a long story short, 10 months later, that was January 11, 1492, 10 months later, okay, October 12, 1492, Columbus arrived to the Americas. Okay? And the first thing he puts in his diary is very significant. Okay? Because the first thing he puts in his diary when he steps out of the boat, he comes back, it was a few hours out, he comes back, and he puts there, these are people without religion. 12th January, check the Columbus diary. The notion he used, people without sect. Sect. S-E-C-T. No? The translation to English, but in Spanish, gente sin secta. No? But secta, sect means religion. Okay? So at the time, he was talking about people without religion. So he has concluded that the indigenous people he found in that island that today we call Dominican Republic and Haiti, that was the first place he arrived, these people have no religion. Now, if I tell you in the 21st century that the people have no religion, you might think that I'm saying that, oh, they are atheists, right? That's in the common sense of today. But in the late 15th century, in Christian imaginary, having no religion means you have no God. Having no God means you don't have soul. Having no soul means you must be like an animal in nature. If you don't have religion, all human beings have freedom. You might have the wrong one. You might have the wrong God. We might kill each other for that. They just, remember, they just conquered Al-Andalus. Right? We might kill each other. But the possibility of conversion was there. Remember, in Al-Andalus, that possibility was there. If you converted, you'd be fully integrated into the community of Christians. You see the point? But now, something new emerged. People without religion. Every human being has religions. If you don't have religion, you must be like an animal in nature. You see the point? Up to that moment, in the Christian imaginary, human beings have religion. You might have the wrong one. I might kill you for that. But your humanity is not in question. What is in question is your theology. You see? That's what is in question. It's your theology. Now, you have a debate that begins with that statement of Columbus. Remember, Columbus took indigenous people and brought them in cages, okay, to Europe, to here, to Portugal, and took them by land, or crossing Portugal, or Spain, etc., to show it to everybody. You know, the people were seeing these people, you know, were put in cages, indigenous people, okay, and shown as a spectacle, as some kind of animals he found there, this kind of thing, okay? So this began a huge debate in Europe for the next 60 years. Because now the debate is, who are these people? These people are they animals? Are they the lost tribes of the first exiles of Judaism that were lost and got there somehow? Who are these people? So there is a huge debate now about who the hell are these people. And you have the position of people saying, well, these people they don't have God, they don't have religion, the position of Columbus. Therefore, they are like animals, that is people without a soul. And therefore it justifies in the eyes of God to enslave them, because this is like having a horse or a cow in the process of production. And there were other people in the networks of the church, because at the time the authority of knowledge was in the church, so the debate was a debate inside the church, okay, about, okay, but why do these people have a soul? If they have a soul, all these atrocities we're doing to these people is a sin in the eyes of God. And if it's a sin of the eyes of God, we are all going to hell. So what are we doing here? So this debate begins, okay? And it lasts 60 years, all the way, this debate, and it's a debate written in Latin, which means that through the networks of the church, this debate is arriving all over Europe, okay? It's through the networks of the church. All the other empires in Europe were watching this. What is this thing Spain is doing, and this debate? Do they have a soul? They don't have a soul. Who are these people? I mean, this kind of thing. And this debate all over Europe. You know, they're watching Spain, because Spain becomes suddenly like the center of something new. They didn't know what this was about. The Spanish Empire have enslaved indigenous people immediately, okay? And they were already, that's the beginning of what we call the world capitalist market, okay? It's the emergence of a new system in the world called capitalism. And so this process began with this debate going on, and there were people inside the church questioning the policies and saying, you know, why do these people have a soul? I think these people have a soul. We're committing a sin in the eyes of God because these people have a soul. So all this atrocity we're doing is a sin. So we're going to go to hell. So this debate goes on. Finally, there is a major debate in the mid-16th century. So from 1492, Columbus' statement, all the way to 1552, the famous debate or tribunal. It was a tribunal because the Spanish Empire put in the hands of the tribunal the decision about the justification of the conquest. And that debate is between Bartolomé de las Casas and Gines Sepúlveda. This is a very important debate, okay? Very important debate for the next 400 years. Okay? And the debate was, okay, is this just justifiable? Is the conquest just justified, or are we doing some kind of atrocity? Okay? So you have the position of Sepúlveda. The position of Sepúlveda was that the conquest was justified, that these people were barbarians, that these people, and the best proof that they were barbarians, and look at this is very interesting. Remember, the authority of knowledge at the time was the church, was in Christian theology. And so it was the church. The Spanish Empire put this in the hands of a tribunal of the church to decide about this. Okay? So the position of Sepúlveda was, okay, these people, the evidence that these people are barbarians and that it's justifiable to enslave them and all of this is that they don't have a notion of private property. So they don't have private property. What does that mean? That they don't have private property? That they are like animals running around the land, you know, they have collective ways of production, and so this looks animal-like. It doesn't look like human-like. Look at the notion. It's already a capitalistic notion under a theological language. Okay, he's talking about private property as the evidence to show how these people are inferior people. The other thing he showed was they don't have a notion of markets, because they redistribute wealth through reciprocity, not through markets. So this is already a capitalistic argument, okay, that becomes criteria of humanity or non-humanity. Okay? And the position of Sepúlveda, I want to characterize it together with the people, even though he didn't say this way, but it was on the side of all the people that throughout those 60 years were claiming that these are people without soul. That it's justifiable to enslave them, that it's not a sin in the eyes of God to enslave them, that these are barbarians, etc., animal-like, etc. Okay? Then you have the other position of Bartolomé de las Casas, who was saying these people have soul, they are human-like, but they are barbarians that need to be Christianized. Okay? So you have these two positions in this debate. Now, this is very important debate, because here is where you have, it has a lot of implication, this debate, for world history and for our present structures of everything, knowledge, society, etc. Because the notion of Sepúlveda, that we're going to characterize as people without soul, when the authority of knowledge, okay, passed from theology, from the church to science in the 19th century, the position of Sepúlveda becomes secularized in biology and natural science. From people without soul, in a theological language in the 16th century, to people without the DNA at the end. The DNA. People without the human genetics. In biology and natural science. The position of Las Casas of barbarians to be Christianized become secularized in the 19th century with social science, especially anthropology. From barbarians to be Christianized to primitive to be civilized. Okay? It's a secularization, it's the same dog with a different color. Okay? It's the same discourse, the same, but secularized, where at one moment the authority of knowledge was theology, Christian theology, and the other moment is the new religion called science. Okay? And this, you have the two forms of racism that for the next 400 years are going to be prevalent in the West. One is the line of Las Casas, is the line of Sepúlveda. Sepúlveda is what we call biological racist discourses. Okay? People without soul or people without DNA. The other line, the Las Casas line, barbarians to be Christianized to primitive to be civilized, is what we call in the literature today cultural racism. Cultural racist discourses. Okay? Inferiority in one is debated based on the constitution, the body constitution. Okay? You don't have soul or you don't have DNA, you are inferior. Okay? The other one is argue on the base of culture. Your culture, you are barbarian, you're primitive, you are inferior to the West. Okay? And the way it touched with biological racism, the culture, is that you naturalize culture. You make it into fixed essentialistic argument about the culture of the other. Okay? And these are the two forms of racism that you're going to see for the next 400 years. Okay? And I'm saying this to see the long durée of these discourses that we hear today that have a long durée in European history. Okay? And goes back to the 16th century. Now, out of that, okay, so far, when they come to the Americas to colonize indigenous people, and this is why I'm seeing this in a relationship, they brought with them all the methods of colonization of the experience of Al-Andalus. To the point that, for example, Hernán Cortés, when he arrived to Mexico, the conqueror of Mexico, the first thing he puts in his diary, he thought that the sacred temples of the Aztecs in Mexico were mosques. Right? He thought these were mosques. Okay? It tells you something about how important was in the imaginary the conquest of Al-Andalus. That when they were conquering over there, they were bringing the methods they had used in Al-Andalus to the Americas. You see? They brought the methods. Columbus in his diary is constantly making reference to the conquest of Granada, to the conquest of, constantly in his diaries, and making comparisons, etc. Because this is what they have in their mind. And so, when they come to the Americas, this debate of having a soul or not changed the connotation of purity of blood. Because now purity of blood is going to acquire, and it's too bad that people are leaving, because you'll see those who stay, how everything will fit together in a very coherent way at the end. But maybe people are impatient because it's going all over the place. But anyway, so the point is, how in the conquest of Al-Andalus, all the methods they use, okay, like for example, the method of the encomienda. When they decide in the tribunal between Las Casas and Sepúlveda, in the long run, Sepúlveda won the trial, but in the short run, Las Casas won the trial. Okay? And they decided that indigenous people, they couldn't do the things they were doing, enslaving them. So they put them in a new form of, you might think, okay, they're going to emancipate them from colonialism. No, they put them in this thing called the encomienda. Because the position of Las Casas, barbarians to be Christianized, wound. So what did they do? They used the encomienda that they have used to Christianize the Muslims. They pass it to the Americas now and bring the encomendero, who is the guy who's going to put the indigenous people to work by force. It's not exactly slavery, but it's a form of forced labor. And he's going to watch their conversion to Christianity. So they bring the encomienda to the Americas after the trial of 1552. Okay? Following the slogan of barbarians to be Christianized. So they put them to work by force, but in a different form of forced labor. That's not exactly slavery. So who's going to do now slavery? Now they took the indigenous people away from slavery. Okay, who's going to now do the slave work? Well, they decided to bring Africans. Okay, so they kidnap Africans in Africa. Okay, in mass numbers. Okay, I don't call this slave trade. This is the language of the masters, because when you say the slave trade, it's as if they were slaves in the shores of Africa. Saying, I'm here, take me to the Americas, I'm the slave. You know, no, these people were kidnapped, okay, by force, put in boats, and brought to America to be enslaved. So there were millions killed in the process of kidnapping, millions killed in the process of transportation, and millions killed in enslavement in the Americas. Okay? So this is a process of genocide to African people. Okay? Now, I was saying that they were bringing the methods of Al-Andalus to the Americas. They brought the encomienda, they brought purity of blood, but now purity of blood acquired a different meaning. Because now purity of blood stopped being a question of surveillance of your genealogical tree and becomes a question of people who have soul, people who don't have soul. Now purity of blood acquired a different meaning than what it had in Al-Andalus. Got the point? Now purity of blood is about if you are a human or you're not a human, you're an animal. Okay? And the second thing, the third thing they brought was epistemicide. They burned the codices, which were the books and the libraries of indigenous people, and the quipus. Okay? They burned them, like they did with the libraries of Al-Andalus. Okay? So they killed the indigenous people, burned their knowledge and libraries, and then with the Africans, they forbid them from practicing their spiritualities and from exercising or practicing their knowledge. Okay? As slaves, they were forbidden from doing, from their spirituality, knowledges, etc. They were slaves, they have to follow rules, etc. Okay? So you have a process of, I've talked now about genocide epistemicide of Jews and Muslims in the conquest of Al-Andalus, right? Genocide epistemicide against indigenous people in the Americas, right? Genocide epistemicide against Africans. Okay? And I have said how the conquest of Al-Andalus influenced the conquest of the Americas. But now, I don't want to do a linear history. Now let's see how the conquest of the Americas influenced the conquest of Al-Andalus. Okay? What happened was that those converted Muslim and Jews that now are called Moriscos, the Muslim who is now Christian, they call them Moriscos. As part of purity of blood to identify them, Moriscos is the new name. Christians who happen to be in the past Muslims. Or Marranos, Jews who happen to be in the past Jews. Okay? They are now Christians. But now, at that moment, the whole question of Al-Andalus was you have the wrong God or the wrong theology, right? And the possibility of conversion was there. Now, with the conquest of the Americas and the debate about if indigenous people have a soul or not, this is going to now carry over the debate about the Moriscos and the Marranos. Okay? Because now, there's going to be a more fundamental question posed, which is, what if these people, what they have wrong is not the theology, is that they don't have a soul? That's conquest of the Americas coming back to haunt the conquest of Al-Andalus. Because now they're going to say, okay, the Moriscos, they are soulless people. Where is that coming from? That was not there before. That emerged with the conquest of the Americas and is brought into Spanish territory to redefine now the Moriscos and Marranos, and now especially the Moriscos, because the Jews were expelled in 1492, okay, from the Iberian Peninsula. So there was almost very few Jews surviving there. That is, after the conquest of Granada, that was January 1492. March 1492, they expelled the Jews. Okay? So the Moriscos are mostly the ones who are still there. And now you have second, third generation of Moriscos. That is, people who were born Christians, baptized as Christians, etc. Okay? So it's not, these people are not Muslim anymore. But they're called Moriscos to mark them so they can watch if they're not faking conversion, you see? So they go after the Moriscos. And now the question turns from people practicing, from people with the wrong or inferior God and religion, it turns now with this soulless concept into the slogan of people who practice the wrong religion or the inferior religion, inferior God, they are themselves inferior. This is a different fundamental question, because now this is the moment when the old anti-Semitic narratives, those old anti-Semitic narratives that comes from the Crusades and even before against Jews and Muslims, okay? These are forms of medieval religious discrimination, where the process of conversion was there, because what the question was a theological question, was not a question about your humanity. So that's why you could be converted. But now, it doesn't matter how many times you go to Mass on Sunday. It doesn't matter how many times you pray or how many acts of conversion you make. Because now, the question is not anymore a theological question. Now, it's a question about your humanity. And now, this is the moment when the old anti-Semitic religious discrimination of the Middle Ages turned into racial discrimination. Where now, if you're a Jew or you're a Muslim, or you happen to be a descendant, even if you're a Christian today, you're a descendant of Jews and Muslims, you are inferior. Your humanity is in question. This is the turning point. 16th century Spain, where the conquest of America comes back and redefines the old discourses of medieval religious discrimination, turn them into racial discrimination. You get my point? It's not, is this clear, what I'm saying? No? It's not that clear? What I'm saying is, the old religious discrimination was saying, okay, you have the wrong God, the wrong religion. Okay. Either you convert or I kill you. You convert to Christianity or I kill you. But if you convert, you could be part of the community of Christians, right? Now, that changed. Because now, you happen to be now a Christian of Islamic, Muslim descent, or Jewish descent. And now, there is a more fundamental question. Because now, what is being questioned with the conquest of America, the debate about if the indigenous people are soul or not, is now extrapolated to the question of Moriscos in Spain and Marranos in Spain. And now becomes a different question. Now is that people who have the wrong religion, the wrong God, now the conversion doesn't matter because they are themselves inferior. You get the point? Because they're not human. Because they don't have a soul. And they began to enslave them in mass numbers in the 16th century. Okay? In Spain, they enslave the Moriscos. A lot of Moriscos becomes enslaved. Okay? Because now, and now the same debate emerged inside the church. But wait a minute, they were baptized Christians. They were born Christians. This is a sin. Yes, but they have no soul. And if they don't have a soul, they are animal-like. So it's not a sin in the eyes of God to force them, to put them in a form of forced slavery. You see the point? So this process went on throughout the 16th century until finally in 1709, they expelled them from the Iberian Peninsula. Okay? They expelled, I don't remember, 300, 400,000 Moriscos, okay, in 1709. Okay? And now the rhetoric about Moriscos is about, they're going to use animal metaphors. They're pushed now below the line of the human. Animal-like. Okay? At that time, anti-Semitism, they were always together. Judaism, the discrimination against Jews and Muslims was always together. This thing that anti-Semitism is against Jews, and that Semites are Jewish people and not Arab Muslims, is a recent thing after the Second World War with Orientalist Zionist literature, you know, with the colonial racial project of the colonization of Palestine by Ashkenazi Jews, okay? Where they are revising history and saying basically that Semitic people are Jews and that Arab Muslims are not Semitic people. This is a recent thing. Throughout centuries, the discrimination against Jews was always together against Muslims. And Semite people were always put together, the Arabs and Arab Muslims together with the Jews. They were always perceived together. The reason why you have this separation now, where you take out the Muslims from the concept of Semite people, is because the Israeli state, the American and the European Zionist position is to say basically that the conflict in the Middle East is a millenarian conflict of the intolerance of Muslims against Jews. And that Muslims are anti-Semites, are the worst anti-Semites. Okay? Now, if you have Muslims, Arab Muslims, inside the category of Semites, you cannot make that claim, because they are Semites themselves, so they're not going to be anti-Semite, you see? But if you expel them out of Semite and make Semite a monopoly of Judaism or Jewish people, then you can claim that they are the worst Semite. So instead of saying that the conflict in Palestine is a conflict of racial colonial settlement colonialism, okay, like they did in Al-Andalus. You go there by force, you clean up, by ethnic cleansing, you take people out of the land and you occupy the land with the Christians, in this case with the Jews coming from the Zionist movement to occupy the land of Palestinians, okay? Instead of saying this is the problem, that will look bad, okay, in the eyes of people supporting that project, they will say, no, 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 this is a millenarian conflict, cultural conflict between Muslims and Jews, because the Muslims are anti-Semite and they've been having conflict with the Jews for centuries, la, la, la. The world upside down, because Christian Europe was always the one that had problems with the Jews. And the Jews always escaped to Muslim lands, because the Jews were receiving Muslim lands with open arms. Okay? Because they were always seen as the people of the book, and always received with respect to their spirituality, to their practices, and recognition of the rights in Muslim territory. That's why Jews escaped over there from the massacres and the pogroms of Christian Europe over centuries. But now you have this revisionist history making us believe that the Muslims are terrible people, you know, and they are the worst anti-Semite and things like this. That's why they have to make some changes in the rhetoric and expel them from the category of Semite people. All along, European Orientalists, since the Crusade all the way till 1945, they always talk about Jews and Muslims together as inferior Semite people. That's what I'm saying. The all religious discrimination against Muslims and Jews, okay, this anti-Semitic discourse that includes both discrimination against Muslims and Jews, that was a form of religious discrimination in the Middle Ages, turned into racial discrimination in this moment of history that I'm describing to you, when the question of Jews and, of the descendants of Jews and Muslims are now Christian, Moriscos and Marranos, are questioning their humanity through the discourse coming from the debate of indigenous people in the Americas, that they have no soul. They are soulless people. Okay? Sujetos desarmados. That's the term they use in Spanish. Sujetos designados. Okay? And so this is important because you see how racism is not eternal. How racism is not something that had been there in medieval Europe, there was no racism against Muslim and Jews. It was religious discrimination, religious intolerance. But it was not racism because they were calling for conversion, they were calling for, as long as you converted, okay, they will survey you to make sure, but you could be part of the community. That is your humanity. What was being questioned was the theology. But then there is a shift there with this debate that started when Columbus put there people without religion. Okay? That is that now the question is more profound. It is about the humanity of these subjects. Okay? Now, there is a fourth genocide epistemicide that I haven't talked about, and that is fundamental to answering the questions I began in this talk. And that is the genocide epistemicide. And usually people don't link these things. These things in history, especially Eurocentric history, appear like disconnected, fragmented things. Okay? All the things I said till now. What I'm doing is putting them together. When you put them together, it opens your eyes to many things. Okay? But to do that, you need to shift the geography of reason. That is, you need to shift your epistemology from a Eurocentric view to a South-centric view. Okay? That is, looking at this history from the point of view of the epistemologies of the South, like Boaventura de Sousa Santos will say, or from the geographic point of view of people on the other side of the fence. Okay? Then you start making the connections that appear to be separate from each other. Well, there is a fourth genocide epistemicide that is linked to this history. And that's the killing of millions of European women in the 16th century accused of being witches. In the same moment that they are doing this with Muslim and Jews, and that they're doing this in the Americas, in the conquest of Al-Andalus, with Muslim and Jews, in the conquest of America, with indigenous people and Africans, they're doing that here with women. 16th century. Not that they killed 2,000 there. No, millions. Let's be serious. Millions of women were burned alive in the 16th century at the same moment that all these atrocities are happening. No? Millions of women burned alive accused of being witches. Who are these women? These women were women who had indigenous knowledges from this part of the world, and that transmitted from generation to generation this knowledge through oral transmission. Okay? There were no books written. It was all oral transmission. And these women were very much empowered at the time when the European aristocracy became capitalist in the 16th century, creating this new world capitalist system, okay, with the conquest of the Americas, beginning with the conquest of the Americas. There is a process of reconfiguration internal to Europe, because then they go after the communities that throughout centuries have been living kind of in communal life of forms of political authority and economy. And the people leading those communities, most of them were women who happened to have knowledges going back thousands of years of indigenous knowledge from here. And those women were very sage. They were sage women, sabias. No?
Wise.
Huh?
Wise.
Wise women who have knowledges of astronomy, of biology, of medicine, of plants, of ethics, of all kinds of things, okay? And he went after them because these women were critical of these ideologies of the time, and they have political power and authority in the communities, you see, that were autonomous from this new configuration of power that was emerging in Europe, okay? Because look, this idea of the Spanish monarchy that I mentioned, of one state, one identity, one religion, these are the beginnings of what we call today the nation state. No? The state that have one identity and pretend to have everybody inside that territory to have the same identity. That's a fiction that doesn't exist anywhere. And whatever the structure had been globalized through the colonial project, it has created more problems than solutions. Okay? Because that's a fiction. That idea, all the population of the one territory should have the identity of the state. Okay? What you create there is a division where the people who happen to have the identity that that state claim are in a more better position relative to the others. So this is the seeds of all kind of problems that I don't have the time to develop. But this woman in Europe had forms of political autonomy and economic autonomy and epistemic autonomy from the powers that be. So they went after them, big time, okay? And exterminated millions of them, burned alive, accused by the Inquisition of being witches. Okay? Now, look at this. 4 genocide epistemicides that I'm talking about here at the same time. 16th century. Now let's go to the 17th century. When René Descartes says, I think, therefore I exist. I think, therefore I exist. Well, the year was 1640, 1638 was the book out. So, I think, therefore I exist. It's a new foundation of knowledge, away from the authority of knowledge of the church. He's saying now that this I, he never says who is this I, is going to be now the new foundation of knowledge that is going to have the capacity to produce a knowledge from a God eye view. Okay? It's going to say this I is able to produce a knowledge equivalent to God. In what sense? It's going to be objective in the sense of neutrality. It's going to be universal in the sense that it's beyond any particularity. Okay? It's not determined by any particularity in the world. It's able to produce a knowledge that is equivalent to God. So he's going to secularize the attributes of the Christian God into this I. I think, therefore I am. And from there, you build knowledge that is going to be, this I is able to do that. So, we don't need anymore the Christian God. Now, we have an I here that have all the attributes of that Christian God. Can produce a knowledge universal beyond any particularity, beyond time and space, and objective in the sense of neutrality. And it's the point of view of all points of view, the point zero. Because it's the point of view of all points of view. Okay? So, to make that claim, he needs two things. He needs ontological dualism, that is, that the mind and the body are two substances different from each other. Okay? He has to claim that. And of course, the mind is like the God of Christendom, in a cloud out there, floating in the air, that is not determined or conditioned by anything on earth. It's not conditioned by a body, and it's not conditioned by space. That's why he needs the dualism to make the claim of the God-eye view. Without ontological dualism, he cannot make this claim. He needs ontological dualism. You see the point or no? What if the mind is in a body? It's not a different substance from a body. What if we think from a body? The whole argument of God-eye view falls apart, because that means you cannot have a God-eye view, because you're thinking from a particularity in the world. Get the point? So he needs the dualism, the ontological dualism, to make the claim that the mind is a substance different from the body, so that the mind is not determined or conditioned by a body or by anything on earth. It's floating somewhere. That's the only way he can claim the God-eye view. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart as an argument. The other thing he needs is epistemological solipsism, the method of solipsism. That is, that certitude of knowledge is going to be achieved through an internal monologue of the subject, of this I, with himself. And the gender here is on purpose. It's a himself, it's not a herself. Okay? So, is this internal monologue, okay, that is going to give this subject the certitude of knowledge. He made question, he answered the question until finally he gets to certitude of knowledge. Why he needs this solipsistic method to make the claim of a God I view. What if human beings produce knowledge dialogically in social relation with other human beings? Then the whole argument of a God I view falls apart. Because that means that you produce knowledge in socio-historical particular context. And now you cannot make a claim that you are a universal knowledge beyond any particularity in the world, unsituated from anything and unconditioned by anything. You see? Because that's why he needs the solipsism. That is an internal monologue that do not depend on dialogue, conversation, or social relation with other human beings. You see the point? But he needs the two things. He needs the ontological dualism and the method of solipsism to make the claim that this I can produce a God idea. Okay? Now, when he said, the I think, therefore I am, of Descartes, that is the new foundation of knowledge, and is considered a foundation of modern philosophy and modern sciences, right? We're still in the Western University carrying over the criteria of knowledge based on this Cartesian mythology. Because the idea is that valid scientific knowledge has to be objective in the sense of neutrality, has to be universal in the sense that it's not conditioned by a body or by a location in space, in a geography, or in power relations. That's why they make the claim of objectivity and neutrality, and universal because beyond any particularity. That's the same criteria that we use today in science, social science, etc., as valid knowledge, right? Now, this Cartesian myth of this I think, therefore I am, that is, I call it a universal, idolatric universalism. I call it idolatric because it's like praising himself as godlike. No? So, philosopher of liberation in Latin America, Enrique Dussel, he asked this very interesting question because he said, okay, this unsituated knowledge, of this pretension of Descartes having unsituated knowledge that is not determined by body or space or any location power relations. Okay? This pretension of Descartes of having a knowledge equivalent to God, that is this idolatric universalism, this arrogance, he says. Okay, who is speaking here? So, what Descartes inaugurates is a new epistemology that is called the ego politics of knowledge. That is an I, a point of view that do not assume itself as a point of view. Okay? A point zero. Okay? An epistemology that pretends to be producing knowledge unsituated, without a body and without location in space or geopolitics of knowledge and power relations. Okay? So I say, okay, this is a world historical phenomenon because outside the West, nobody has made this claim. If you go to other traditional thought, nobody said, okay, I am godlike or I'm thinking godlike. Okay? Because as a matter of fact, it's forbidden in this, because of the cosmological notion I was mentioning to you, that Pachamama, Allah, all these notions are a force created of life with intelligence that nobody can claim to be that. We are produced by that, but nobody is that, right? And the critique of idolatry in the Judaism, in Islam, in many other traditions is precisely the pretension of having something on earth that claims to be equivalent to that, you see? And so, what you have here is a secularization of the Christian attributes, of the God Christian attributes into this I, okay? And now, Enrique Dussel says, okay, instead of accepting the myth that someone can produce a knowledge without body and without space and without location or without social relation with other human beings, okay? If you accept that myth, you fall into the traps of this perspective. He asked a different question. He said, who is speaking and from where he's speaking from. That is, he's trying to situate then the knowledge, situate back Descartes. You see, instead of accepting the premise that Descartes that he's floating like God somewhere, okay, let's situate him in a body, in space, in geopolitics, in power relations, social relations. Who is this? And then he says, the I think, therefore I exist is preceded by 150 years of I conquer, therefore I exist. That is, this is the European man that now has become the new center, okay, of a new world system that emerged after 1492. And now he doesn't need God anymore. Now he gets rid of God and he's God on earth. And he has now the epistemic privilege to decide what is reality, what is not reality, what is truth, what is false, what is this, what is that. He doesn't need anymore the theology. Because now he's God on earth. Right? So he's saying, this is the imperial being spirit that now has made himself God on earth. And I want to supplement what this argument of Dussel to say the following. The ego cogito, I think therefore I exist, of Descartes, is preceded by 150 years of ego conquero, I conquer, therefore I exist. But one do not lead you necessarily or inherently to the other. There is a mediation here that we need to name between the I conquer and the I think, the idolatric I think, the godlike I think. And that is I conquer, therefore I am. Right? Between the I conquer, therefore I am, and the I think, therefore I am, is the I exterminate, therefore I am. In other words, is the genocide epistemicide that I have been describing here, is this ego exterminum, the I conquer, therefore I exist, that is the mediation between the ego conquero and the ego cogito. In other words, when Descartes says, I think, therefore I am, or therefore I exist, this I is naming there, he never says, who is this I? But it was very obvious and clear who was this I at the time. Because after the four genocide epistemicides of the 16th century, it couldn't be a Jew, it couldn't be a Muslim, it couldn't be an indigenous person, it couldn't be an African, and it couldn't be a woman, not even a European woman. So modern epistemology, the foundation, the epistemic foundation of the westernized university is built upon four genocide epistemicides in the 16th century that are buried in history and in our memory, that have given the white European man the privilege of, epistemic privilege of knowledge over everybody else. And so the universities that we have created, this westernized university, carry this history and this epistemic privilege into the present. Okay? Now, why is it that it's only from these countries, 5 countries? Because in the 17th century, when Descartes writes, I think, therefore I am, he's writing this from Amsterdam. When Amsterdam has displaced the Iberian Peninsula from the center of the New World System created after 1492, in the 30-year War. So, the Iberian Peninsula is now inferiorized relative to the north of Europe. All the categories of race that the Iberian Peninsula apply to the rest of the world are now going to be applied to them. And now you have the split, north, south, Europe, okay? where the new center of the world system created in 1492, with the Iberian Peninsula at the center, with Portugal and Spain at the center, is going to be displaced to Amsterdam after the 30-year war. And this power and economic displacement carry over an epistemic displacement. Okay? Where now, this split is going to create a situation in which now these people from the south of Europe are not going to be part from the Iberian Peninsula of the epistemic privilege, okay, of this I. Then comes Kant, 100 years later, Immanuel Kant, and he's going to say that rationality begins in the white man, and he's going to use color now, because after the racism began as a religious racism, as I explained. The first marker of racism was not color of skin. The first marker was religious identity, right? Or religious racism, you have a soul or not. Or you become Muslim and you become, and you are descendant of Muslim and Jews and you are marked as inferior, you are soulless, no? Now, with the African, the trade of Africans and enslavement of Africans into the Americas, color racism comes with a force. And now Kant, in the 18th century, is going to say in his anthropological writings that the transcendental subject, he talks a lot in his philosophy, reason, rationality, is north of the Pyrenees Mountains. In the white man, north of the Pyrenees Mountains. It makes very clear that south of the Pyrenees Mountain, there's no access to reason or rationality because they're contaminated with things, Muslim things, African things, etc. And he would say the yellow man, Asia, the black man, Africa, the red man, the indigenous people in America, they don't have views, they're irrational. And of course, he never talks about women. Women are outside the conversation. Be that non-European, non-Western, or Western women, they're out. They have no rationality, they're irrational beings. Okay? So when you read Descartes, and he said, I think therefore I am, we are so generous. We say, oh, that's me. No, that's not you. Okay? That's not you. Oh, the transcendental subject of Kant. Oh, that's me. No, that's not you. Okay? You will read these people with a lot of generosity. Okay? And in fact, it's not, they're talking very precisely about a particular group of people in the world. That is, the idea of dividing knowledge south or north of the Pyrenees Mountains is very clearly a racist idea, where now the Iberian Peninsula is now inferiorized relative to the north of Europe. In racial terms, we can see that with the force now, coming back with the force, with the crisis, financial crisis, where now the reason why you have financial crisis in Europe is because Southern Europeans are corrupt and lazy. Have you seen this? This is the discourse that comes from Germany. It's all over the press, all over North Europe. Corrupt and lazy. This is exactly the way they have talked for centuries about Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Okay? So, but this is the way they always perceive Southern Europeans. The problem is that the European community, this 20-year dream, where South Europe entered the European community, created the illusion of Southern Europeans that they were now Europeans. Now they are, the old generations of people in Spain, they used to tell me, the first 10 years they were in European community, they were always saying, since when we were Europeans? We always were cheap labor for us going to Germany, France, everywhere to work. And there, they never saw us as part of Europe. We were always inferiorized. So, I don't get this. That's the old generation. But the new generation were born in the European community in South Europe. They thought they were Europeans. They start believing this illusion. Now it's dead. This illusion is dead because now it's very clear to them after the crisis, after the things that are being said about them, that they were never seen as an equal within Europe. They were always seen as inferior. And that goes back to the 17th and 18th century. So to come back to the question about the structures of knowledge of the Westernized university, okay, you see now, why is it that at the beginning of the 21st century, we still have structures of knowledge so obsolete that are based on 4 genocide epistemicide of the 16th century that create patriarchal and racial structures of knowledge in which the majority of the population of the planet are not part of the epistemic privilege or legitimation of knowledge production, of critical theory, of philosophy, of social science, of art critique, or production of art, etc., etc. Okay? Why is it that those structures persist till today? Because they are tied with global imperial colonial design. If my knowledge is superior to yours, and yours is inferior to me, I know what is better for you. Okay? I know what is better for you. Because my knowledge is superior to you. So it doesn't matter what you say is better for you, because whatever you say, if you're a woman, you're people from non-Western world, whatever you say is considered inferior to the knowledge of Western manufactured countries. And therefore, I know what is better for you, so I try to persuade you that my knowledge is what you need to do. I know what is better, so you have to do this or that. If I persuade you, first, peacefully, but if you're not convinced, I would have to use the force. So we went from 16th century Christianize or I'll kill you. You are a barbarian. You don't know better. You believe in things that are close to demon and to evil. You know, you're not really Christian. You need to become Christianized. I try to persuade you. You don't understand. Well, if I need to kill you to save your soul from your barbarianism, I'll kill you. And I'm justifying killing you because your knowledge is inferior to me and you are inferior to me. You get the point here? How the epistemology is linked to projects of colonial imperial design and genocide. Look at this. Do you know how many people were killed in the 16th century? We're talking about millions. In the name of Christianize or I'll kill you. Just count the women killed in Europe in the name of Christianize or I'll kill you. Just count them. Not to talk about the Africans and the indigenous people. Count that. 19th century, civilize or I'll kill you. You are an obstacle to progress. You are primitive. You are an obstacle to civilization. I persuade you that you need to follow Western European civilization. You don't understand, then I would have to use force because you are an obstacle to progress and civilization. So if you don't understand by peaceful means, you have to understand by violent means. And if I have to kill you in the name of progress and civilization, I'll kill you. You know how many indigenous people in the world were killed in the 19th century in the name of civilize or I'll kill you? Which is a secularization of the Christianize or I'll kill you in the 16th century. Millions! In the millions! Between indigenous people, just North America, just think about North America, just USA, Canada, just think of that. How many million people were killed in the 19th century? Indigenous people killed, just there. Not to talk about Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, and etc., etc. In the name of civilized or I'll kill you. Then we go to the 20th century. Develop or I'll kill you. You are underdeveloped. You're backward. You don't know better how to develop economically. Here is the recipe of development. If you resist, you don't want to follow this, then I will have to use the force. Because you are an obstacle to development. And there you have all the CIA coup d'etat all over the world, killing millions of people to establish developmentalist military dictatorships all over the world. Just in Indonesia, in the first month of the coup d'etat in 1965, just in Indonesia, they killed 1 million people. Just in Indonesia. Okay? Now, you sum up Indonesia, Indonesia. Is this clear?
Yes.
Indonesia, you have questions?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I thought maybe I was pronouncing it in a way. So, you have just in Indonesia, 1 million people killed the first month of the coup d'etat. Okay? You count all the genocide against indigenous people in Guatemala with the coup d'etat, CIA coup d'etat. There was a trial this year to one of the generals. You found that in the press. Rios Montt was trial for the genocide of indigenous people. Okay? There were more than 300,000 indigenous people killed. Okay? In the coup d'etat by the military dictatorship in Guatemala, just in Guatemala. I mean, we can go country by country. You see, this we're talking about millions of people around the third world. Okay? In Africa, in Asia, everywhere. Okay? Develop or kill you. Beginning of the 21st century, democratize or kill you. Okay? You're authoritarian. You know about democracy. You know. Even though all these dictatorships were created by the CIA, okay, and they destroy all this democracy that existed before, but now they say, oh, you're authoritarian, and then they come with tanks, airplanes, and weapons to teach you democracy, okay? In the name of democracy, okay? Look at this. This is, again, this epistemology that I've been describing as epistemically sexist racist, that is at the foundation, not only of the Western university, but also of the structures of power of the modern world. And that has been at the center of the destruction of life. This is why indigenous people in the world, all over the world, call this a civilization of death. If you listen to Aboriginal critical thinkers, to indigenous critical thinkers all over the world, to black critical thinkers, they call this system not an economic system, like the white left love to say. They talk about a civilization with an economic system, not an economic system that has produced a civilization. A civilization with an economic system. And they call it a civilization of death. Why did they call this a civilization of death? Because it has killed more human lives, but not only human life, more forms of life than any other system in the history of humanity. To the point that we don't know if 100 years from now, the human race will be here, okay? We don't know if 100 years from now how many species will survive, okay, this civilization. Okay? That has a history, has a beginning and an end. This is not eternal, it's not the human beings has been terrible with nature. No, no. Please, let's not talk in very superficial ways, because all the civilizations before, with all the critiques we can make to them, none of them, the majority of them has a lot of respect to make to other forms of life and to nature. To begin with, the idea of nature is a Western construct. It doesn't exist elsewhere. And the idea of nature is the dualistic secularization of the world of the spirit and the world of the material world. Okay? The human is the life form. Nature are inner objects. Okay? And nature is a means towards an end. This is the way the West think about nature. Whatever technology you build around that rationality have the seeds of destruction of life. Because any technology you build thinking that humans are outside, that everything you do that we call nature is a means towards an end, it doesn't have the rationality of reproduction of life. It has the rationality of destruction of life. Any technology you build around that principle, it doesn't have a thought about, okay, how are we going to do this so that we don't destroy these other forms of life, we don't destroy ourselves. because we think of ourselves as outside. And we think of that as a means towards an end, not as an end in itself. See the point? But when you think in other cosmologies that I was describing at the beginning, where you have a holistic notion, where the humans are inside that force, okay? Where that force that creates many forms of life, okay? That energy, if you want to call it, we are all inside. There's nobody outside that, okay? We are all inside that. And whatever you do with other forms of life are not a means toward an end, are an end in itself. Because whatever you do with that is going to affect you, is going to affect everybody. So that's a different epistemology. That's why the summit of Copenhagen about the ecological disaster of the planet ended up in a disaster. And the response to that was the summit of Cochabamba in Bolivia, where the indigenous president of Bolivia called the indigenous people of the world, and they came with a counter response to the disaster of the summit of Cochabamba, of Copenhagen. And they have something to say, because they have a different understanding of life and a different understanding of how to relate among humans and between humans and other forms of life. And they came with a very concrete proposal that the summit of Copenhagen didn't have what to say. Because Eurocentric thinking is in a terminal crisis. They cannot offer solutions to the problems of humanity. They are entrapped in their own epistemology and the premises through which they have been working. Even the left. This is not a problem of the right only. This is even the left, the westernized left. That for me, the westernized left is like the westernized university. They again reproduce all the epistemic racism and sexism, but now from the left. And we saw the result of that already in the 20th century, okay, this colonial leftist project with the Soviet Union, okay, and the Soviet bloc. We saw the results of that. Okay? And the point I'm trying to say is that if we want to decolonize our ways of thinking and the structures of knowledge in this space we call the Westernized University, we need to now do a different exercise. We need to bring the critical thought that is coming from different traditions of thought. The critical thinking, we need to diversify the canon of thought of the Westernized University. That's one of the major things we need to do. That means that Western man, traditional thought is one more. It's not the only nor the center. Okay? There are many others that we need to bring. If we're going to look at a problem, we need to bring all the different critical knowledge and learn from this different critical knowledge instead of having this provincialist look at the world where we only read this white men of 5 countries to give us answer to problems they cannot even answer, okay? Because they haven't thought about it, you see? It's not because there's nothing inherently wrong with them, but they haven't thought about it. Because they haven't lived other experiences, okay? There are many other experiences there that we need to learn from and have been theorized by many other people, and we need to bring that, so we need to diversify the canon of thought. We need to stop the disciplinary divisions which lead us to disciplinary decadence in the Westernized University. Disciplinary decadence is a concept by Afro-Caribbean philosopher Louis Gordon, who is saying Western University has become a place of production of decadent knowledge, because instead of producing knowledge to deal with the problems of humanity, we're producing knowledge to deal with the problems of the disciplines. And then we do conferences, we have the, journals, we talk to each other, but the world is over there with other problems, leading with other things, and we don't have anything to say about that, because we are dealing with disciplinary problems, not with the problems of the world. And that leads us into a type of knowledge that is decadent, that it doesn't serve anything, okay? So the point that I'm trying to make, that then we need also to reformulate the way we have organized the disciplines and think about problems, not disciplines. What are the problems that we're facing in the world? And then we bring different knowledges into thinking about problems. Different knowledges that come from different traditions of thought. Okay? Men and women that have thought critically from the Islamic tradition, from the indigenous tradition, okay? From Latin America, from Africa, from different places. And then we can have also, we can learn also from the traditional Western men. But it has to be one more. It cannot be the center of the conversation anymore. Because they don't have anything to say about problems of the rest of humanity. You see the point? So it's not that there's nothing to learn. And again, I'm clarifying this every time I talk about this. Because Eurocentric fundamentalism is the norm. We call Eurocentric fundamentalism the type of knowledge we do in the Westernized university and elsewhere, this epistemic racism, sexism, and call it a form of fundamentalism, because you think of your knowledge as the superior and the rest inferior, is a form of fundamentalism. But we never call it fundamentalism because it has become normalized. It has become naturalized. It has become the norm. We call this is the fundamentalists that call the others fundamentalists. So if you try to talk about critical thinking using Aymara knowledge, using Islamic knowledge, then this Eurocentric fundamentalist will tell, ah, you're a fundamentalist. Because you're using other cosmologies or epistemologies to think. So it's very interesting to watch this, because what is being, you have a Eurocentric fundamentalism that has installed itself at the center of knowledge production and as the privilege of knowledge production. And we never see in the press something like Eurocentric fundamentalism have killed more than 1 million people in Iraq in the last 10 years, from 2003 to 2017. More than 1 million civilians killed in Iraq. We don't see that in the press. Because the fundamentalists are always the others, you see? We're never fundamentalists. And I call this a form of fundamentalism. Because you think of yourself as superior and the rest inferior, you think that your knowledge is superior, the rest inferior, and therefore you give yourself the authority to do atrocities in the name of your superiority. Moral superiority, epistemic superiority, ethical superiority, political superiority, economic superiority, you name it. The list goes on. Artistic superiority, because the others do primitive art or naive art. Have you seen this language? The art of the others over there are primitive art or naive art. You never call Picasso naive art, okay? You never call Monet primitive art. You see, you could see that these structures are described everywhere, okay? And so the goal is to have epistemic diversity in our canon of thought. The goal is to start thinking in terms of problems of discipline, start thinking about problems of the world. And so the moment we diversify the canon of thought with epistemic diversity, this space would stop being a unit / university. It will become a pluri/versity. Because we will start working under a canon that is pluriversal, not universal, not one that defines for the rest, but between us, we define for us. And so we have horizontal structures of knowledge where not one becomes the superior and the other is inferior. Where we now establish inter-epistemic dialogues and conversations that can give us a better way to think about the progress of humanity, instead of having one that defines for everybody what is good for you. Now let's define between us what is good for all of us. And that will stop being, the moment that happens, that we decolonize this space from the canon of thought of Western manufactured countries, and we turn this into a space of epistemic diversity, and we have a new canon of thought, this will stop being a uni/versity, and it becomes a pluri/versity, a pluriversity. And that's, in my view, the way to go. Otherwise, this is going to continue in a decadent way, becoming obsolete as the days pass. Obsolete as a knowledge that is useful for anything. Okay? I'll stop here. Thank you. You see what I say? I went through many things to arrive to the answer to the question, you know, because without that history, we don't have, you know, we don't know why we are in the structure we are. You know? But anyway, I would like to hear comments, questions, critiques.
Does there exist a university, like you said? Is there a good example?
Well, there are, okay, I'll tell you, let me say a few things. There are indigenous universities in Latin America today, for example, that are, you can call them pluriversity in the sense that they don't reject Western knowledge, but they have indigenous knowledge and cosmologies organizing the way they think about, if you want to call it discipline, because it's a different structure what they do. It's not sociology, philosophy. They divide knowledge in a different way than the way we think about this. And so they try to, in a sense, build this thing called pluriversity in the sense that they also are open to other traditions and other forms of thinking, knowledge, etc. You see, it's not just that there are indigenous universities and it's only indigenous knowledge that is accepted there, okay? That's an example, but of course they don't get a lot of funding or a lot of support, you see, from the authorities or from etc. So that's a problem. There is the project of ethnic studies in the United States, which is where I'm coming from, because I want to clarify this, because people hear me talking, and many people, there are two reactions. One is, how come you could be talking like this at Berkeley, from being at Berkeley, okay, which is one of the centers of this epistemic sexism, racism, okay? How come? Well, there are two answers to that I always hear. One thing is to say, this guy is a hypocrite because this guy is talking about this, but look, he's living up in Berkeley, he's in the university, there is a structure of power, blah, blah, blah. And then the other answer is to say, wow, Berkeley is great. They allow people like this to talk over there and to teach, and you know, wow. So these are the two reactions. Well, let me say that I'm Puerto Rican, I come from the colonial history of the US Empire. I'm, in a sense, a colonial subject inside the US Empire. We're a colony of the US for the last 500 years, 500 years. We've been a colony for 500 years. Together with indigenous people inside the US, black people inside the US, Asian people inside the US, and Mexican people inside the US. We organized a strike in 1969 to challenge the white university in terms of its epistemic structures and to create forms of knowledge that are, in a sense, inferiorized by that same structure. So the word strike, that is a spillover of the civil rights movement. In '69, in San Francisco University, San Francisco State University, and at Berkeley at the same time. Okay? And they were claiming, it was called the Third World Liberation Front. That was the name of the students doing the strike. They were racialized students inside the US, claiming a space of epistemic thinking inside the white university. Okay? And they were claiming the formation of a school, a third world liberation school, that is, we think of ourselves as the third world inside the first world. Okay? That's how we see each other. As the third world inside the first world. So we were calling for structures of knowledge inside university that will, in a sense, allow us to produce knowledge from our own perspectives. Our own view of US history, our own view of philosophy, our own view of social science, etc., etc. Okay? That strike, in San Francisco State, they created a school with many departments. At Berkeley, we didn't succeed in creating a school, but we succeed in creating a department. That is, in both places, the authorities did not like this thing called third world liberation. So we negotiated for a different name, and the name that was, as they proposed, and that we have to accept, was ethnic studies. So when you hear from outside the US, ethnic studies department at Berkeley, you think that this is like in Europe, white people studying Indians, studying blacks, and in Europe, ethnic study and things like that is, if it exists, it doesn't exist almost anywhere, but in a few places that exists, it's always white intellectuals in studying blacks, Indians, and things like that. It's a colonial project. In the US, ethnic studies is the racialized people producing our own knowledge, critical mainstream knowledge. Okay? So we conquered the space. It was not that the space was given to us. We struggled for the space. We conquered the space to have a space in those spaces of the Westernized University. And in 1999, there was the need of another strike, because in the 30 years between 69 and 99, they were cutting off all the lines of professors who died, retired, or left. So by 99, the department was shrinking because the white university wanted to make it disappear. So there was another strike in 99, and there was new lines of professors ruined by that strike. Okay? And we've been there surviving. There being hunger strike, there being there's been all kinds of struggles to survive there. Okay? And our knowledge is always under attack, and the department under attack, because, as you hear me speaking, we go against the colonial, Eurocentric view of the mainstream departments. So we produce a knowledge that is more rigorous than their knowledge. Okay? Look what I'm saying. Our knowledge is more rigorous than the type of knowledge produced in those mainstream departments. And I want to say this out of arrogance. Okay? I'm reacting here to the type of thing that is said about us. Like, oh, this is people who are, producing knowledge that is, they say all kinds of stereotypes about our knowledge to discredit us. Okay? And that's why I'm saying our knowledge is more rigorous. Okay? And so we take our time we not only know their history, we know our history, you see? And that gives us, in a sense, a very powerful stand, because they don't know our history, you see? They don't know the other history. What they know is this mainstream fairy tales that I've been criticizing here. And so when they come to debate with us, they cannot debate with us. They have problems debating with us, intellectually speaking. Okay? Because they don't know the history outside this narrow way of thinking, okay, of Eurocentric structures of knowledge. You see what I mean? So, in that sense, our pretension is not to now criticize the Western University, to now destroy and have nothing. No, it's to have something better. That's something better than what has been created. That's what we call to decolonize the space. Decolonize the space is not to destroy it, it's to improve it, to make it better. That's our aim. And to make it better, in our view, is the things I've been describing. Okay? To make it pluriversal, not universal. Okay? So, you see here that I'm there, not because they give me the space just like that. We conquer the space. Not that I don't deserve to be there. People like me, we have the knowledge and we have the preparation to be there. But it's not the white universities who give us the space. It was the struggle of our people who give us that space. That's why I'm there. And I'm claiming that space. I'm going to struggle inside that space. See the point? And at the same time, I'm saying this because I don't want you to get the impression that, oh wow, Berkeley is great. You see? They allow these people like that to say this thing. No, we're there because we conquer the space. We struggle for that space to be able to say these things and to empower this kind of things. Now I come here, I never imagined I would be traveling around the world talking about these things. Never imagined that in my life. Okay? My parents do not have university degree. I never imagined I would be in a situation like that. But that's thanks to the civil rights struggle. That happened in Europe. Something like that happened, occurred, a civil rights struggle, etc. You're still expelling immigrants and things like that, and right-wing governments gaining elections. The more Islamophobic, the more racist, the more votes you get. So anyway, at least we have this civil rights movement that allows us to conquer space and to be able to say these things. Yes?
I wondered how you select your professors. Yeah, you say we are people. What is your people like?
Well, we have to have PhDs. There's no way you can enter that space without having a PhD. Okay? But at the beginning, we were able, because there was not much training in our community, we were able to have professors without PhDs who were sages, let's put it this way, people with a lot of knowledge of the different communities. But today, 30 years later, we have now a generation of people with PhDs, and that's a requirement, of course. Okay? So we have PhDs. And this strike that began in Berkeley in '69, it began a wave of strikes, okay, over the 70s until the mid-70s, all over the universities of the US, including the elite universities. That's why you have African American studies, Latino studies, Asian studies, women studies, queer studies, all these things. Because there were struggles that created these spaces inside the white man university. Okay? And that's why we have the gender studies, we have all this stuff. Okay? And we need to say, the civil rights movement of people of color in the United States put as part of the agenda of affirmative action, gender. So a lot of white women benefited from the civil rights struggle in the US. Because a lot of white women that were, if you look at a photo of an American university in the early 60s, mid-60s, even late 60s, not to talk about 50s or 40s, it was all white males. Okay? Very few women, or even white women. Not to talk about people of color. Okay? Civil rights movement of people of color in the US put the gender question in the agenda, and as part of the affirmative action policies that were put forward, a lot of white women benefited because that was included as part of the issue of justice in American society. So you have a whole generation now of people of color as well as white women now trained, now prepared, etc. You see, and being able to enter into university spaces. See the point?
I have a question about the area of Constantine. I I was always disturbed by this structuralism of the everything on earth by the man, and I am asking myself, from where does it come, this dualism between spiritual and material?
The dualism of Constantine,
yes,
in particular, is a reinterpretation of Christianity from the point of view of the Roman Empire.
mm-hmm.
If you place the spiritual world on the side of the state, and you sacralize the state, and everything else, the material world, outside, you see, and you make that split, then you create the world of God and the world of evil, right?
So first it's a question of society, not from spirit and body, it's only from power of the society and the rest.
Yes, it's a way of appropriating Christianity. At the beginning, it had the notion of unity, like the others, but
yes,
it turns into this dualism with the idea of Trinity, okay, and turn the whole thing into idolatric ways of, let's put it to use that language. The moment you sacralize the state, you make it idolatric, you make it godlike. You see the point? And so now the dogmas of the ideology of Christianity cannot be questioned because they are godlike. You see the point? And now, if you happen to do science and discover something in nature that questions those dogmas, you are a threat. And now you happen to be someone, a woman that have indigenous knowledge, okay, and there are questioning some of these dogmas, you are a threat. All these people were subject to being burned alive, especially in the later with the decline of the Roman Empire, with what we call Dark Ages, Middle Ages, no? That these people were subject to repression. That began with Constantine, Roman Empire, all the way to after the Roman Empire, the structures. So the dualism allowed for the power structures to claim to be on the side of spirit and the rest on the side of the materiality. But this is the good and the bad. The material world is seen as evil, demoniac, you know, the demon, and the other world as the goods, you know, and so by creating the split, then they have the authority to accuse of being evil and being part of the demon and things like that anybody who were criticizing the state or criticizing the powers that be or trying to have a different form of life or whatever, okay? So this is a very convenient way of ruling, no? And so this is that's how it happened. So that's why in European history there was the need for secularization. Secularization was needed because this structure called the church impede critical thinking, impede science, impedes all these things. So the bourgeoisie, the global transnational bourgeoisie, capitalist bourgeoisie, you know, the capitalism created after 1492, with the card, they got rid of that church because they needed science to keep moving on, you see? And they put a new foundation of knowledge, and they made themselves godlike, you see? Because you know, as part of the project, colonial imperial project and capitalist project, they needed those knowledges. They couldn't continue with the other type of knowledge. You see the point? So they need secularization to be able to do this. But that's local European history. Islam didn't need that. So today, to tell the Islamic world, you need to secularize, it's a stupid thing because the Islamic always have secularism. The West learned secularism from Islam, in Averroes, in the world of Averroes. You know, secularism was, it was always in the Islamic world that no state can be secularized. No power terrestrial structure can be secularized. It was always there. Any sultan that says, I am God, is immediately delegitimized in the Islamic world. Because you cannot claim to be, that's idolatry, I mean, allies, it's beyond everybody. You see the point? Nobody can claim that. That's why in the walls of Alhambra, it says, the only victorious is Allah. And it's put all over the walls. So the Sultanate is living in a place that is reminding him every single day that he's not God. Go Go to Alhambra, visit Alhambra and learn, okay? Because in the walls it says all over, inscribed, the only victorious is Allah. So that gives you an idea of how it was a completely different form of political authority than feudal Europe. In feudal Europe, the feudal lord was a representative of God on earth, and the state was secularized. So you need secularism to be able to criticize. But in the other worlds, because nobody can claim to be God on earth, you see, the critique did not imply going against the spirituality. You see the point? Because nobody is God. Okay? Yes. You jump from your chair almost.
No, because you're talking about this. The Sultan sees it, reminds that he's not God, but it doesn't mean that there's no power abuse problems in this kind of civilization.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not denying that, but then you can criticize without being called a heretic or without being burned alive, because he's not God. You see, he's terrestrial. In Christian Europe, at the same time that you have that sultanate with all the problems you're describing, you couldn't do that in Christian Europe. Because the Lord, the feudal Lord, was the representative of God on earth. If you criticize God, Christian now, and you be burned alive, you see? But in the other world, no one can claim to be, so the critique was possible, science was possible, all these things were possible. That's why they were able to develop all these knowledges that here was impossible. You see? And that's why when Europe says today to the Muslim world, you have to secularize, the Muslim world just laughed. Because that means you don't know the history, you don't know anything. You don't know that science came to you through the Islamic world? You don't know that? You don't know that science was developed through Islamic civilization in the indigenous civilization, in the Chinese. No problem, because they had this notion of unity, where whatever you discover in other forms of life, in nature, etc., is not going to contradict anything, because that's part of the same. It's a holistic notion, you see. But when you make the dual split between material world and the spiritual world, the powers that be are in a position that they become then sacralized, and anything coming, anything you do that question their dogmas, you become a threat, you see? I'm talking about the condition of possibility. I'm not saying there's no conflict, I'm not saying there's no power, I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying, and the power structures there operate through different logics than the way it operated at the time in the feudal Europe, or even today. For example, I said that racism is a modern thing. It didn't exist before, not even in feudal Europe. I mentioned how the conquest of Al-Andalus was done under a theological foundation, not under a racist foundation. Racism came out of a very historical, particular moment that is the one that I described today, the moment when this happened and how it happened.
I wonder if the thing like thought, like this dualism you're talking about, even if it's not natural, then you can say observe when it appeared and there was something else before. But how do you go out and deconstruct something like this?
Not only that.
It seemed like.
No, I'm going to tell you something more shocking. The patriarchy that was globalized was Christian. There was no patriarchy in the indigenous societies of the Americas, and there was no patriarchy or homophobia in West Africa. And even in the Islamic Muslim world, there was no homophobia. These are all things that came with the European colonialism. The colonization of Europe brought Christian-centric patriarchy to the rest of the world. Look what I'm saying to you. Very shocking. Because I'm saying this in the following sense. It's not that there was no non-Christian patriarchy. Okay? There were places in the world that were forms of patriarchy that you can call non-Christian forms of patriarchy. They were very different from the Christian form of patriarchy, which was the one that got globalized. And there were many parts of the world. The world was very diverse before European colonial expansion. And was very diverse in form of political authority, form of autonomy, but forms also of sexuality as well as questions of gender. So there were places in the world that there was no patriarchy. And European colonization brought it. Now, this is very difficult to imagine from a European-centric point of view. Things I'm saying here.
Not that much.
Okay, because I'm saying, no, I'm not talking about you, I'm saying in general, it's very difficult to imagine, especially to westernized feminists, because the tendency to take, there are two things here that happen. Make local European history world history. So if Europe has to secularize, to have science, they think that that was the same everywhere, and that's not the case. Local European history is not world history, which means that the obstacles that Europeans have to produce science didn't exist elsewhere. So the question of secularization was already elsewhere there. You didn't need that to be able to do science or critical thinking. That was a problem of Europe that then Europe make it universal. You cannot imagine that there were things better before Europe. You see? And the other thing is the problem of thinking that, and so the feminists used to think of patriarchy as a 5,000-year system. And in fact, that's like, making patriarchy something almost eternal, universal. And not understanding that there were many places around the world where there was no patriarchy, no homophobia, no nothing like that, okay? And I can cite you works if you want to explore this. For example, there is a Yoruba feminist, and you can find it in this book in Amazon. It's called The Invention of Woman. Her name I cannot pronounce in Yoruba. It's a Yoruba feminist from Nigeria who wrote a book called The Invention of Woman. That book is fantastic. It shows you how there were no structure of patriarchy before the European colonization of that part of the world. The work of Maria Lugones in Latin America, the work of Silvia Marcos about Mesoamerica, about Central America and Mexico. There are many sources. Joseph Massad, Deciding Arabs. Okay? It's a very important book because Joseph Massad, a Palestinian guy, who did a fantastic work showing how homophobia arrived to the Muslim world through the pathologization that was created by law, by colonial rule of Europe over the Middle East. And how before that homophobia or that kind of thing was not an issue, okay? In the Muslim world. It became an issue with the colonization of that part of the world. Read the book Deciding Arab by Joseph Massad. I mean, there's already a body of work showing you other alternative worlds that existed and that were destroyed through this civilization. Today, you cannot say there is a space outside these things, okay? Because obviously, all corners of the world were colonized, and that means that many people, including the colonial subjects, were internalized a lot of these structures, okay? And so today, you cannot claim there is an outside to these kind of forms of oppression, okay? But it's important to know that the world was not like that, until very recent, okay? 500 years ago, that the world was very diverse, that there were other possibilities that existed. And it's important to know that in order to criticize this idea that somewhere or another, this is human. Oh, this is after all human. Humans are racist in Adam and Eve. Humans are patriarchal since Adam and Eve. There's nothing we can do about it, The only thing we can do about it is to make sure we're on top, okay? Not to be below. That's the only thing we can do. But, make sure you are the dominator in a racist structure. But there's no way we can change that. This is human. No, I'm sorry. This is historical, and that didn't exist before 1492. And there were many parts of the world where there was no patriarchy, and there was no racism, not even in Europe before 1492. These are all historical phenomena that have a beginning and will have an end someday. Okay? But they're not eternal structure or human structure or anything like that. Why this happened? Because in Eurocentric thinking, they love universal abstracts. That is, they love to take all the common sense and all the knowledge or structural concepts of the present world and make them transhistorical. Because by doing that, then you relativize the role or the responsibility of Western civilization in the mess we have today. Because then, if you say that slavery, oh, you know, slavery, oh, it was the Muslims there, it was the Romans, it was the Greeks, it was all slavery. And then you make slavery a trans-historical category. And then it's the same. What the Europeans did after 1492 with the Africans is the same that the Muslims were doing before, it's the same that the Romans were doing before, it's the same that the Greeks were. No, I'm sorry, it's not the same. Because European slavery is racial. Was racial. I'm sorry?
Same but different. I mean, it's not the same, but is it really, I don't know, it's always the question I can't, was it better before? Was it,
no, listen.
You know,
the question is the following.
The thing
in the Muslim world, a slave could be born, someone can be born a slave and become the sultanate. How would that happen? Well, because in the Muslim world, the so-called slave has rights. And slavery was not racial, was something related to wars and to conflicts, like, you know, if you have a war, you know, the soldiers captured, become enslaved by these others. I'm not defending slavery, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, you cannot collapse modern racial slavery with the forms and the logics of slavery that were there in other civilizations. It was all the same, which is what happened in Eurocentric thinking. Because by doing that, you flatten down the discontinuities in history and the responsibility of the West in the type of slavery that emerged after 1492, that was genocidal slavery. And that was racial slavery. That didn't happen before. Okay? It didn't happen before, not only in terms of the qualitative dimension that I've been describing here, of the killings of millions of people. That didn't happen before with that, with other civilizations. I'm sorry. As much as we can criticize them. This is the worst we ever had in human history. The one we're living now. There's no progress here. That's a myth, this thing of progress. What kind of progress is it when we don't know if we're going to be alive 100 years from now? What kind of progress is this? And what kind of progress is it when you have buried millions of people around the world to have the wealth you have here today? What kind of progress is this? The point? So, we cannot flatten down history this way, because then you make of everything of today transhistorical. And the moment you make it transhistorical, it appears to be something human. And if it's human, there's nothing you can do about it, except make sure that you're on top, you're not below. Okay, that's it. Okay? And so, the same thing I say about patriarchy, the same thing I say about slavery, about racism, etc. There was no racism before 1492. Listen to what I'm saying. That's a post-1492 phenomenon. And so, this is a problem, a world problem, a global problem now. So for me, Eurocentrism is not a geography. Because you have many Eurocentric thought elsewhere today. It's everywhere today. You could have the black Africans being Eurocentric. You see, that's why the Westernized university is such an important power structure of the world system. It's going to socialize the elites of the world into this paradigm of Eurocentrism everywhere. So you have Westernized elites everywhere in the world today, okay? And being part of this global system of civilization of death, like the Bolivian people would say, okay? And so what we need, I think, to think about is to think about decolonization. We need also spiritual decolonization, because this system has a spirituality. That is a spirituality of death and destruction. And we need to then deal with our egos. Okay? It's funny because I see a lot of white Europeans and Americans appropriating now Buddhism, Sufism, all the different traditions of Islam or Buddha, or, you know, that coming from the third world, but then in a very perverse way. Because all these traditions are calling to put your ego in your place. Okay? To control your ego, to diminish your ego. This is the path of spirituality is to decenter your ego. This New Age appropriation is the opposite. It's like making your ego the biggest and justifying your wealth based on some kind of narrative that you are spiritually superior. Have you seen this New Age thing? I'm completely astonished, especially that I'm coming from the center of this New Age thing, New Age appropriations, which is San Francisco. When you go to the Bay Area, you see this, you see the zoo, all the different traditions that you can imagine, with this New Age thing, and distorting everything to make now the Western men, why they are superior, or now they turn the whole spirituality into explaining why they are wealthy and superior. It's because they have some spiritual superiority and so on. So it's just completely crazy. Okay. So when I'm calling for spirituality, I'm not calling about that. Okay. I'm calling about seriously engaging, putting your ego in your place. Okay. Which is and working with your ego, because decolonization is not only to deal with the external structures of the system, but also the internalized structures of the system. So we have internalized those external structures in ourselves, in our, in our ways of thinking, being, etc. This we need to work both ways. So I'm not calling for now becoming a monk in a mountain and separating yourself from the world to decolonize. I'm saying it goes both ways. While you struggle against the external structure, you need to also struggle with your internal structures. Is that the point? And so it goes both ways. So we need spiritual decolonization.
Yeah. On va finir, parce que sinon on peut continuer toute la nuit. Je crois que tout le monde a beaucoup de questions sur ce sujet aussi de décolonisation.
Well, I want to say something. I want to thank you very much for inviting me and for having the courage, of inviting someone like me to say these things here, okay? Because for me it was surprising. I didn't see any faculty here. For me it was like, okay, this is very revealing, okay? I saw one person that entered that maybe was a faculty because of the age, and then left very fast. Not you, someone sitting around there. And that person left after I was starting to talk about the genocide things. I saw the face, and the person got scared maybe and left. I don't know what happened, but the person left. So for me, and I want this to be recorded, that I find really discouraging. I find really discouraging that in this university, only you, Ingrid, is interested in topics like this. That nobody else show up, despite the publicity, despite everything. Okay? Yes? I'm sorry? I'm talking about the faculty, not the students. This was full of students here. But the faculty, where is the faculty? Where is the faculty? Tell me. Are you faculty?
Full of women.
Here, except her, who is the only one that is interested in these topics. Okay? So I want this to be recorded, because I would like this to be heard by the faculty here. Why someone like me who is going to talk about these things, they're not interested in hearing these things. I have this question. Okay? But anyway, thank you.